Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Alien versus Predator Galaxy podcast, the original Alien and Predator podcast. I'm co host Adam Zeller. Joining me is my usual partner in crime,
Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks.
and we have a special guest with us today, author Mike Diver. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for having me. I don't have a nickname, but I should have thought of one.
Oh, did we forget to give our nicknames, Aaron? I'm RidgeTop, if you're on
I
that
did.
form.
Yeah.
It's I'm surprised you don't have an alias, Mike. You know, this is relics of a long time ago on an internet server from AvP2 or some other game. I don't know where. Yeah, RidgeTop's alien related, isn't it, Adam? It's the aliens.
Well, that's not where it's from, but we can call it that.
I was always terrible at having names like that for gaming handles. It was always some variation on my actual name, which did obviously give away. Well, it was good for your pals because they knew who you were, right? But I wasn't very good at that.
Us, Aaron and I, growing up in the age of the Xbox 360, gamer tags were all the rage. So it kind of played into the forum culture, I think, a little bit.
Speak for yourself. That mine was on GameSpy and the inbuilt browser stuff.
So we have been meaning to do this discussion for a little while, which, I feel like the topic of gaming in Alien, Predator, and AvP has just been so significant for us as a website. I mean, we started as a monolith AvP2 resource for the PC game until just now. Like, honestly, some of our highest engagement comes from the video games, almost just as much as the movies and series and all that. So I've been wanting to just kind of do a general gaming discussion, maybe reminiscing on some of our memories with that. And we thought Mike would be a great choice to join us for this discussion because you have a book coming out, which is an unofficial guide to alien video games mostly, but also touching on AvP and Predator. Did you want to give us a little intro about who you are, Mike, and tell us a bit about this product you have coming out shortly?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Aliens, the video games, is the very, very straightforward, straight to the point title of the book. Like you say, it is unofficial. So, it's not like Fox, Disney, various other publishing IP holders have given it any seal of approval. So, it's managed to go into lots of little avenues of exploration and speak to a lot of people who worked on the games. Without having to go through various PR channels and approvals and all the rest of it. It's coming out in August 2026, but you can pre-order it now on various online big bookshops. I'm sure you can think of a few. And the publisher itself, White Owl, has it on their website now, which is probably the cheapest place to get it. But all of that kind of shilling stuff out the way. The book itself is very much a passion project. I have great affection for a few Alien games, particularly around Alien 3, which we'll discuss a bit later on. And I just thought, why only focus on that for an article somewhere when this book doesn't exist in the world? And I've written 5 books prior to this one, so I figured, may as well give it a shot. Like you say, it's got all the AvP games in it as well, all official AvP games, all official Alien games, lots of unlicensed games, lots of unofficial games, a few fan games and cancelled games along the way, and then a few inspired by Alien bits in there. So I try and cover as many bases as I can while giving the really important games enough space to breathe with good interview content. But it's a book, right? So, the kind of real completionists listening will probably be like, it's missing random, weird online game from, 10 years ago that I might not have seen, or I don't have, the page space or word count for. But pretty happy with how it turned out. And so far, people who've seen it are like, yeah, it's a good one. Touch wood.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you graciously sent us a early PDF of the book, so Aaron and I had a chance to take a look at it, and yeah, I think it's a really good chronicle of just the history of these games. We have some younger fans that may be just getting interested in these franchises. And I think it's good to have a resource where you can just see in one place kind of the decades long history of these franchises in the space of gaming. You had a bit more time to check it out than I did, Aaron. So what did you think of it?
Like you said, I really enjoyed it. There was, well, at the end of it, as you were doing all the AvP stuff, I was like, I do not remember so many of these web games that you'd started chronicling. And it brought back some real memories, like the Rampage one. I was like, you know what, this has completely gone from my memory, but now Mike's out here uh, recounting it a little bit, and I'm like, this was wild. AVPR time was wild. And
Kind of pre-smartphone mobile games, yeah. Like whenever a new movie was coming out, you had to have a tie-in Java game, and the AVP games certainly had a few of those, for better or worse. Yeah, that Rampage game I mean, Rampage is a great old arcade game anyway. So if you just adapt that for a goofy, massive-headed alien and predator, it's still going to be fun. Tearing people out of the windows and eating them.
it was definitely one of those 5-minute and forgot it things, I think, for us. But like, you getting as many people as you did as well, contributions and delving a bit more into the background of them was one of the things I really enjoyed, because as we'll talk about later as well, I find it really difficult to get people to open up about video games nowadays. So it was thrilling to see the access that you got and to get that sort of background and more insight into so many of the games. Was fantastic. Like Adam said, the website's foundation is in video games. A large part of my early sort of investment in the franchise was through the video games as well. So it has a really sort of important part of my fandom background. So this is a book that has been needed for a while, and I'm glad it's finally here, Mike. And I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm glad. I mean, I really, really enjoyed writing it. I mean, I tend not to do books that I don't enjoy the subject matter of. Otherwise, it'd be, not a lot of fun for me. But this one in particular, yeah, it was really fun to dive into. And trust me, on the access and stuff, yeah, there's like over, I think there's like 24 brand new interviews in there, sort of threaded between the chapters, throughout the chapters. And then there's like a lot of archive stuff in there, from previous interviews. But I did run into a lot of brick walls as well. There were people who just ended up ghosting me, didn't get back to me, said they'd contribute, but then they didn't, or I just ran into a PR, who'd say something like, they'd go from, oh yes, studio, whoever will speak to you about this, and then you come back 2 weeks later and they're like, no, they will not speak to you about this. So I can assure you, there could have been more in there. If ever a day arises where I get the opportunity to revisit this book and like expand it out or something, I know who I'll be chasing again to get in there. Yeah. But I was happy enough with who I got, yeah. Or more the games I got the interview content with, I suppose I should say, yeah.
And before we fully delve into the topic of gaming here, we have a little tradition on our podcast when we have a new guest, and that is to ask what their first encounter was with our favorite extraterrestrial monster, the alien. So, for you, was it a game or was it one of the films, or what's your introduction to Alien?
I mean, so it's kind of a film, but it's more a book. So when I was in junior school, so let's say I would have been about 8 or 9, probably about that age. I used to sometimes stop off on the way home from school, well, maybe more like 9 or 10, go and see a friend who lived a few roads away. And his dad had what I believe was called the movie novel of Alien, which is lots and lots of photographs. So it tells the story of, he's going to get it off the shelf, tells the story of Alien, right? But it's not, I don't think it's got words in it. It's just like you follow it. There it is. Yes, that cover, that's the one. So it's got, the Nostromo and the big refinery behind it on the cover. So that was my first exposure to it. And I remember looking through that several times when I'd visit this guy's house. We'll call him Tom because that's his name. When I went to Tom's house to play on NES or whatever, like he was the only kid in my class who had a NES. Like other people had Spectrums, Amigas, maybe Master Systems, but he had a NES. So he had Zelda, and his dad had this book. So that was it, and I was like, always like, the images that stay with you, right? Obviously, it's got the chest burster in it, but just the look of it, the kind of like that hard, like, are these things made out of Lego bricks, kind of like quality to some of the chunky retro futuristic design that my preteen brain didn't understand exactly what all that was in terms of like an aesthetic, but I just knew I liked it, right? And kind of off the back of that, we were getting into the early 90s. So you get into 1992. I'm not at junior school, I'm at senior school then. And you've got Alien 3 coming through. But that's when video games, I guess, the video game connection is made. Because I read a lot of Sega magazines. I had a Master System, then I had a Mega Drive. So Genesis in the US, obviously. I don't think the Master System really happened in the US. It was there, but it didn't really make much of an impact. But it was pretty big in Europe, and I'd be reading the magazines a lot, either buying them with my pocket money or just reading them in the newsagent until the owner kicked me out. And I'd see Alien 3 for Sega with the kind of side scrolling, rescue the prisoners, shoot the aliens, escape before the timer runs out, and they all go blur. The chest bursters come out of them. So I managed to get that on Mega Drive. Really, really, really loved it. With like get really frustrated. It's a hard game. You'll get through maybe the first couple of levels without a guide. I used a guide, back in the days where like the guide was basically the maps of the levels printed out on a page so you could like see where all the prisoners were. Great stuff. But off the back of that, of course, I knew the Alien 3 movie was coming, and that game did not give you a good idea of what Alien 3 would be. But somewhere along the line, I also then watched Aliens around about the same time because I was really into, this game. So I guess the magazine pictures would have been early 92. When was the movie? Summer of 92, wasn't it? So yeah,
May.
early 90. Was that May
May.
time? Was it? Okay. So sometime in 1992, I'd have been like year 7 or year 8. So not that young still, but then I got to record Aliens off the TV, when it was on TV. Asked my mum if we could tape this movie, and yeah, just got up the next morning, watched it at 6 a.m. kind of thing, and was just like riveted by it, just loved it. And of course, that aligned a lot more with what Alien 3 the video game was. And then when I got to watch Alien 3 the movie, a couple of years later, when it come to VHS, when it's on home video, because I was too young to see it at the cinema, I always quite liked it. Never really got the hate for it, but I could see it was a very, very, very different film. So that kind of original trilogy is my entry point, but from not one of them at the cinema, all from different approach angles,
Yeah.
approach vectors. Yeah.
Now, I agree on the Alien 3 thing. I saw it after Aliens, the lovely age of 10 years old, and I'd gone into it. My dad said, "Are you sure you want to watch it? It's not very good." Number 3, and that was I've enjoyed it all along.
Yeah, I think it's a film that only improves as well, via your assembly cart, and just I think maybe it improves because of what came afterwards. I don't know, but and all things are relative. But I still like it, and I think there's a bit I write in the book, something along the lines of fans, whoever didn't like the fact that it had this quite dark and depressive tone, and you got to think, well, luck's going to run out at some point, right? And it's good. It felt like and I love the ending of that film,
Mhm.
with the facility shutting down and the music rising over it and the sun coming around the planet. It's perfect. And the little obviously the callback recording. Well, if it
It's
all ended there, I'd have been happy.
I was just gonna say it was a brilliant bookend. It was so. I feel like it'd be cheesy to say poetically done, but it was just perfect. Yeah.
I think that was just the frustration with Alien 3 is because after Aliens, which was just such a kick-ass sequel for a lot of people, that's what really turned it into a franchise. But Alien 3 was kind of made seemingly with the intention to cap the end of a trilogy. And I don't think, at least in the States, I know the movie did better in Europe, I believe.
Well, we're
Um,
much more morbid and depressed all the time, so we appreciated the film more.
I don't think people were ready for Alien to end, which, makes sense with Alien Resurrection coming only, how many years later? It came in 97. So
Although I've got a sense Mike really does not like Resurrection or potentially the sequels, the prequels here.
Me, I mean, so this is the thing, right? I
Although you said you
rewatched.
like Covenant in the book, didn't you? Or am I thinking?
No,
Am I getting confused with somebody
no.
else here?
Resurrection, I do quite enjoy because it's weird and it's goofy, and it's in It kind of it feels like a side story. It doesn't feel like it should be a main film. It feels like it should be like one of those little like 10-15 minute bonus films that someone makes for YouTube, but like they got the budget to do the whole thing, right? Um, I think there's a cut somewhere of that movie that's like an hour long and it's terrific, but there's so many weird zany things in it, like the face hugger through the head, and just where Winona Ryder's character, like, does like a shopping center call out for the aliens to converge on a particular place. It has all these kind of little beats in it, and I know it's Josh Whedon, isn't it? Is that his name? That's right, isn't it? I think his
Yeah,
stock has
he wrote
fallen
it.
in recent years,
Oh
but
yeah, oh yeah.
it's off the time, and it's got the Amelie director on it, so it looks, bits of that movie look so good. It's quite yellow, but bits of it look so good. I think it's not as bad as some people make out, but yeah, Covenant for me didn't do anything. And Prometheus, actually, I mean, not to upset anyone, but like I remember going to see that with my then boss, and we went to see it at the IMAX at Waterloo, and we walked out like, does anyone need a drink after that? What have they done, kind of thing,
Yes, yeah, I feel you on that one.
Yeah, but no, Resurrection, I dig, and I also like, we'll get into it, but the Resurrection game that was actually, trailered on the home video releases of Resurrection, and even before
I
then,
think
when there was
AvP
the
Classic as well.
quite possibly on
got
the
a
videos,
trailer
yeah.
on the video. I mean, sorry.
Yeah, but like, if you look at some of what the game was like then compared to what came out, you can see
Yeah.
like that's video game development 101. Like, what you see at one point might not be anything like what actually comes out 2-3 years later. Yeah.
And that was another fun thing about Alien 3 is the marketing. There was a bit of a disconnect with the tone and the goal of the movie. Is the marketing tried to make it seem like there was this big action thing, and a lot of the games had aliens running all over the place and stuff, whereas the film was obviously a much different
There was
tone.
that suggestion at one point that it might be on Earth as well, wasn't there? There was
Mhm.
that alien.
An
I think
early
it was.
teaser.
Yeah, I think that was just just announcing the fact that you could go and see it at the cinema, which is on Earth. But nevertheless, it definitely threw a few people.
There was no single script of Alien 3 that is at least out there or known about or mentioned in anything that has Alien 3 set on Earth. So
Yeah.
So were those your first Alien games? Those early side-scrolling Alien?
Yeah,
3 games?
Alien 3 on the Mega Drive. I think I had on Mega Drive before Master System, but I do have both now. I mean, they're essentially the same game, same structure. There's a few different versions of that Probe software made Mega Drive game. Like it's on Commodore 64, it's on NES as well. But the Super Nintendo version I played quite a bit as well, with actually same friend whose dad had the book. So he has quite a connection to Alien as well. So I remember him getting Alien 3 on the SNES, which came out the next year in 1993, and being quite obsessed with that for a period. The way that it had gone from this like against the clock, some of it was against the clock, but not much, really, really tight against the clock, save all the prisoners, to a slightly more methodical, almost Metroidvania-esque, explore 'em up, where you had to like map your path to the next place, and sometimes you might be welding a pipe. That's not very exciting, but it's like the job you have to do while there's also these, hundreds of critters running around. Because again, of course, it couldn't just have one alien. None of the Alien 3 games have just one alien, because wouldn't be much. I was gonna say wouldn't be much of a game. I know Alien Isolation exists, but it didn't at the time. I think there's a great game to be made of Alien 3 in the style of Isolation.
And to be fair to Isolation as well, that game is not just one alien.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I have to tread carefully. Like, how spoiler? That game's been out for over a decade. We're fine.
We're spoiling everything. It's fine. Any of you behind the scenes on Isolation 2, feel free to throw that in there as well.
I mean, there's definitely. I mean, I'm absolutely not going to mention any of it, but there's obviously stuff you hear in these conversations and in the world I kind of work in professionally as well. So I'm in video games that you're like, that sounds really cool. I absolutely legally cannot put that in print. But it's going to, again, I said it before, like if there's the opportunity to revisit this and expand it out with some of the games that are in development now, that'd be really, really cool. Because there's well, we know we know there's an Isolation sequel coming. I think it's widely rumored, if not confirmed, that there's a Fireteam Elite follow-up coming as well.
Yeah.
Supposedly Q3 this year, based on stakeholder reports.
Yeah,
we're expecting an announcement for that one on Alien Day. Fingers
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, and then there's the obviously the next bit of Rogue Incursion to come as well. So at least 3 things in the pipes.
And how about you, Aaron? Do you remember your first definitive Alien game?
Before we go on to that, just to Mike's point there about Isolation and Alien 3, I was at a Eurogamer Expo the year that Isolation was coming out, and I think Creative Assembly were there, and one of the questions that was posed to them, I think it was Gary Napper, lead designer, who was on the panel, and they were asked about DLC or things they'd want to do, and Gary was like, this would suit Alien 3 so much, and I would love to do something extra that's very much in the same genetic makeup as of Isolation, with Alien 3 as the subject. And I'm like, yeah, that would absolutely work, and it's a shame we never got to see a bit more of that kind of spin-off kind of material.
It would. I mean, the whole kind of prisoners in the tunnels trying to trap the alien thing would have been really cool in that that style, that genre. Alien 3 the Gun does have that bit in it, sort of, but obviously is a very different tone and type of game. I love Alien 3 the Gun.
I play that. There's I think it's just called Barcade. So, and it's one of the things I love as an adult is arcade bars. They're so awesome. There's one in Los Angeles. I can't remember exactly where in Los Angeles, but if you look Barcade, you'll find it. And it has a fully working and well-maintained version of Alien 3 the Gun. So my friend Mike and I played that for a bit, and it was just so cool. I need to go back there and just beast through the whole thing because it's just such insanity, and definitely recommend it.
It's one of those you need infinite credits for, I would say, because it's a proper old arcade game. It's going to hurt you.
I missed out on the opportunity to buy one of those. I came across a I forget the website, Gumtree. I came across a Gumtree listing for a cabinet like a week too late, and it had sold for like £300. And I was like, oh, that would have been an absolute freaking bargain. But I also have no idea where I would have put this.
Just build an extension, just some things require space. Yeah,
that is a dream of mine, to have a home arcade one of these days.
I'd just love to own Aliens Extermination.
You need more room for that, though.
They do have Arcade 1UP as a company that makes newer arcade cabinets for pretty reasonable prices, and I have been hoping for the day they finally delve into some of the Alien, Predator, and AvP arcades we've seen. What you reaching for now, Aaron?
So, sorry, before we tangented a little there, Adam was asking about the first Alien game I ever played. For Mike, it was Alien 3 on the Mega Drive. Adam and I are a little bit younger. And my first Alien game, I have the actual copy of it still after all these years, was Probe's Alien Trilogy on the Sega Saturn. And is the price still inside? No, okay. I do have some other Sega Saturn games where the price is inside and it's £60 and it makes me cry. The video games have always been expensive. But yes, this thing absolutely terrified the shit out of me as a little 5-6 year old. No, maybe 7 years old when this thing came out. I could not pick up the box. I was too scared of the cover art to even pick up the box as a child. And I remember watching my dad play it on the telly, and I'd be sort of hiding round the corner of the settee, just sort of peeking out from behind the armrest, trying to get a look at him playing it, because I was terrified of these 32-bit xenomorphs on the screen. For listeners who have heard other episodes, big part of my obsession with Alien is due to the fear, due to the way I physically reacted to it, the nightmares that it gave me for 5 straight years as a child. So yes, I was terrified and watching it behind the sofa. But at some point, I gave it a go. I tried to get through the first level or two, and it just absolutely shit me up. And I'm glad I still have it. And I think it's a ridiculous game, but an immensely fun game, even all these years later. I've never finished it. I got to a significant way through the third part of the game, where it's recreating Alien, and we're on the, as the game calls it, the bone ship, which I absolutely fucking love as a description for the derelict. I think it's brilliant. But yeah, never finished it. I will do someday. I still have my PS1 that I was doing the replay on downstairs with the memory card with that save on it. So I will get to it someday. But yeah, that was it for me. That was my first Alien game.
It's a classic. There's lots of people who I speak to who have really, really fond memories of Alien Trilogy. I think we kind of forget, like, in the pre-Halo era of everything being, or pre-Resurrection, I suppose, of shooters operating on, dual sticks, like just how many solutions developers had to come up with. So Alien Trilogy, when you go back to it, feels quite tricky to get hold of. I think it feels quite. It's not an easy game to click with, but that almost plays in its favor, because it kind of makes you think, well, my character, who is Ripley, obviously, stomping bugs and what have you, should be scared running around with a little handgun while these heavily pixelated facehuggers come up the screen like that.
That absolutely terrified me as a
The
child.
facehugger bit, I can understand it, yeah, but that feeds in, fear of smothering and stuff as well. It's obviously there, but yeah, I mean, it gets brought up time and again as a kind of classic quote unquote boomer shooter, alongside AvP on the Jaguar, actually, which is, no offense to Jaguar fans or to Rebellion, but Trilogy is the superior game of those two by a margin, in my opinion. IMO, caveat, put a little, disclaimer next to that. That's not an official perspective of anyone, but yeah, no, Trilogy is great. And again, Probe Software, so they had the heritage of making those Alien 3 games, and you can see that the love, there was love for the franchise in that game and what they did. Yes, it's quite removed from the movies, but it's spiritually quite on in sync with them, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with the atmosphere, the things like the draw distance, playing into that tension, and
yeah, when you turn a hardware limitation to your advantage, that's a good thing to do. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Rob's joined us on the live stream as well, and says Alien Trilogy for the PS1 is his favorite game of all the Alien console games, even to this day. Rob, favorite one. But Adam, how about you then? What was your first Alien game?
So as far as I'm aware, I mean, I had a few introductions to the franchise that I got me intrigued before I was able to see the movies. When I was still too young to see the movies, unlike Aaron, who saw them being too young anyway. But I remember, so one of my first introductions was I would go to the mall, and my parents would take me to KB Toys at University Mall. And that's one of the first places I really saw some of the xenomorphs, was seeing the old Kenner toys on the shelves. And in that same mall was an arcade, and they had Capcom's AvP. So as far as I'm aware, that is my first Alien or Predator game, was Capcom's AvP. I think I might have briefly played the SNES one, but it was just so difficult that as a child, I did not make much progress in that. But I think the first one I spent some time with would have been the Capcom's AvP in the arcades. I would say the first one I really kind of beat and was really into was Rebellion's AvP for the PC that came out in '99. I remember having a laptop. One of the schools I went to growing up was a private school, and the kids had laptops or whatever. And so that was my first time having a laptop. And I noticed the game, asked my dad to get me the game, and he got it for me. And yeah, I installed it, and my computer ran it great, and I just got through the whole game. So that I'm pretty sure was the first one I ever beat. Um, yeah, and as far as like, I would say the most impactful Alien game for me, probably Monolith's AVP 2, and I imagine it'll be the same for you, Aaron, because that was the game kind of during our teenage years that we were just so into. We'd come home after school and play it and get online and play multiplayer matches. The interwoven single player story for that was just so impressive, that that was the game that really kind of solidified my interest in the franchises.
Yeah, I would say AVP2 was the one that made the most impact on me as a fan. I played AVP Classic. Well, it would have been AVP Gold. Sorry, was the version I would have played previously. You know, Rebellions, and that was a game that I think was a lot more atmospheric. Um, you know, the aliens were scary in it. Even the Predator missions um, were quite tense and again atmospheric. You know, when you're playing against the aliens, and like I said, to me, Alien has always been about fear. So when I first played AVP Classic, I had to play as the alien, so I was not fighting against the aliens. But as you know, Mike mentions in the book, the speed of these things in that game is ridiculous, and it used to make me motion sick. You know, running on the walls, running at that speed, so I couldn't really play it for long until I got used to it. But impactful is definitely two, because I think more the online play. You know, this was the first one of the games that was really online and fed into a sense of community. For me, I could talk to fans on the in-game chat. We don't get to do that anymore. For me, in AVP two, I getting to sit and actually talk a little bit of Alien and Predator with folk and try out all these user generated custom maps, single player maps, and that was the thing I think that pulled me in a lot more. But that's not to say there's not more to the game. Of course there is. It is the most complicated narrative one out of the games of that era. You know, especially coming in from the older stuff. You know, old games aren't especially known for narrative strength. AVP Classic wasn't particularly a strong narrative game. You know, it was three very loose little mini games with some form of little story that you'd kind of get a little indication of through the video messages and the text messages at the very start of the game. But two, you know, it demonstrated to me as a teenager, you know, a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, the that video games could be this whole other experience. You know, it's more at that point in line with playing a film in some ways, an interactive film, and actually being depth there, things that are relevant to the franchise, you know, stuff that those games did, you know, the introduction of the Praetorian. Of course, the comics kind of had it earlier with the Royal Guard and stuff, but the Praetorian, as we know it now, you know, that came from Classic, and then they expanded lore logs in AVP two. So big, impactful games for me as a person, for me as a fan, and for the franchise.
And how about you, Mike? Is there one game you would say has impacted you more than the rest now that you've played a whole lot more than those early ones?
I don't know really. I mean, outside of the ones I played first, obviously kind of set the gears twirling or whatever, you know, in terms of affection for the series en masse. I think professionally, I went to see Isolation when it was being, you know, demoed at Creative Assembly, and you know they kind of sat us down in a dark room, as you do, and you know you couldn't see what was behind you. And there was actually a guy behind me who kind of scared the shit out of me at one point because I kind of forgot he was there and you got your headphones on. So that game, in terms of taking what had for quite a long time become an action orientated series back into horror, back into, you're that, in the movies, if you just run up to one of these things, you're going to die. The games give you that kind of power trip, that rush of being the hero and stuff. And obviously isolation strips that all away from you. Like, it doesn't even give it to you in the first place to strip it away. You are completely out of your depth from the start. So I think in terms of impact in me thinking this is a IP now that games developers are taking really seriously. Not that there weren't good games before that. Infestation on DS is a great game. AvP 2010, the Rebellion game for consoles, was a very, very good game. I mean, I don't know about great, but it's lasted pretty well. The campaign's fun. It still supports multiplayer in some capacities. But yeah, Isolation, seeing that running at Creative Assembly and seeing how proud people there were of it, like that they knew they'd made something really special, even for them. For that, bear in mind that's a studio, that's the Total War studio, and their game before Alien was like a Viking hack and slash game. They had no pedigree in horror, let alone the kind of sci-fi worlds either. So yeah, just like a perfect moment of all these things going right, I suppose. So yeah, in terms of leaving an impression, definitely that. And I think you see that in later games. Dark Descent is a completely different game, but it plays on that horror of being caught out, of being trapped, of being underprepared, and all you can do is hide. Even when you are a little group of Marines, you are not at any advantage. Doesn't matter how much flamethrower fuel you've got. They will keep coming until they don't. So yeah, maybe that. Or I mean, if we're rewinding further, and it's a game I didn't play in the 80s, but a game I played around the writing of this book, the 1987, the UK version of Aliens, the way that kind of does a first person horror experience with like side scrolling. So you look around the room and the noises it makes, like when there's an alien in the room, like really kind of set you on edge. That's a surprisingly effective jump scare sort of game that you can play on a Spectrum, or a C64. So absolute credit to that game as well.
And you mentioned in the book about the remake of that.
Yes, there's one you can get online. Yeah.
I went and downloaded it, and I was like, I did not get very far in that. And it's a reminder of how hard all the games are.
You need to you need to know where all your there's six people. Certainly in the original version, there's no real personalities. They are called Burke and Vasquez and Bishop and Ripley, but one doesn't have any different abilities than the other.
No.
But you can only move them. It's almost like a board game in some respects. You can only move them so many rooms or so many, so far at a time. So, do you send one out alone to look for, the armory? Do you bunch them all together so that when an alien's in the room, they'll all get got? Yeah, you have to kind of think tactically, and it's definitely not easy. And it's especially difficult if you haven't got the map that came with it. I mean, that's another thing. When you got that game in the 80s on cassette, it had a map that came with it with all these rooms marked. They're all numbered rooms, and your little character on screen has the number of the room they're in. So you look at the map and go, okay, they're 3 rooms away from them, sort of thing. But if you haven't got that, you're playing in the dark. So yeah, if anyone wants to emulate that, find a map online, before you start.
And that experience at Isolation as well, Mike, Isolation at Creative Assembly, I had a similar one. I went to one of the later press days. Well, it wasn't a press day, it was just us actually. It was just me and one of the other lads from the website, and they sat us down in that dark room and put the headphones on, and we played that bit of Gemini Lab that you will have probably played earlier with the rest of the press. That was the first time since playing Alien Trilogy as a kid that I had a huge physical reaction to one of the video games. I'm sorry, podcast listeners, you'll have heard me say this many times before, but I came out of that first demo, and the community manager, the publicist, was trying to talk to me, and I was like, just give me 5 seconds, please. And I had to stand outside and have this physical, come down from the adrenaline of the experience. And that was when I knew that game was going to be really good.
It's the only time you would step out into Horsham and feel a sense of relief. Sorry, Horsham residents. But...
I mean, I'm hoping to be back there soon at some point next year, maybe the year after. But
yeah,
I welcome it. I welcome it.
Isolation is truly one of the standout, Alien games, if not the most significant one, I would say, in the history, if we're just going off Alien. I mean, so much of my introduction was Alien versus Predator. But when I got a little bit older with my PS1, I got Alien Trilogy, I got Alien Resurrection, which Alien Resurrection, to me, it's almost kind of like this was the first real first-person alien survival horror. And I love the atmosphere of the PS1 Alien Resurrection. It's just so unfortunate that they made that game so damn difficult that almost no one could beat it. And I did have to use cheats to get through it. It was worth it because that game is so spooky and so cool as well. But yeah, Isolation is just such an incredible game. And so many of the games too are based off of the vibe of Aliens, like you were saying, Mike. It's kind of the power trip, just mowing them down. And Alien Isolation was the first one to really capture that feeling of the first film, and you feel like you're in a sequel to that first film, not an Aliens game. I would say, and I'm glad you included this in the book as well, another one of the most impactful alien gaming experiences, or really alien related experience in general for me, was that Alien Descent attraction in Southern California. And I was lucky enough to do that twice and experience both versions of that. But just the level of immersion, walking through a physical environment that had atmospheric effects, and reaching my hand out in a virtual space and just grabbing this like cold railing as I was on this catwalk about to enter this like mine, was just such a cool experience as a fan. That's something I wish was just still around. And if they, they pulled that off with just these cell phone VR headsets, and it wasn't as impressive as it was, if they would have taken that and really boosted the fidelity of it more, it could have been like just completely mind blowing. More recently, I mean, Alien Rogue Incursion was just such an awesome experience to have that in VR, and that one is widely available for people. So, but Descent was just such a memorable experience for me.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get to experience that one myself, obviously, but it sounded really cool. Like all the videos I watched of it, all the things I could find online about it, it kind of seemed really odd that it was just this one thing that happened in this one shopping center in Orange County and didn't go anywhere else. Like if that was today, you'd make it a touring thing, for a brand. But Alien, I mean, it's not even that long ago, but like, I think nowadays with the strength of the brand, you would definitely try and do more.
Did you ever get to do Alien War?
No, sadly not. It was slightly before me being in a position where I would go to London on my own or could do what I wanted to do, But I've met plenty of people who have, and they obviously still speak very, very highly of it. They did a little touring thing of it as well, and I remember being in Bournemouth with my parents when it was at the BIC, I assume, at the Bournemouth International Centre, and it just being something we couldn't do because my little brothers and sister were with me as well. So yeah, we couldn't do that, but it was definitely on the. Yeah, if I'd have had the opportunity to do it, I would have loved to do it. And some of the videos are so funny of that as well. Like I think people like ourselves, it wouldn't be fear. It would be like you kind of be laughing like a horror themed escape room or something, right? Like you're in on the joke, but it's still a great time.
Yeah, I never got to do it either, and I hate that I didn't get to do it. But we had it, Mike. It was over here. It was in England.
I mean, again, like such is the kind of upward trajectory of the Alien brand name, I suppose, and modern and even Predator alongside it. You got Badlands, being adjacent to the alien, it's in the in universe, right? It's like cluing people up to it. Like my oldest son who's 15 has been watching Alien Earth. Like that's his in to the series.
Mm.
So like there is this kind of upcoming new generation of fans who, will be there to support such, another, yeah, thing like that, some sort of like real immersive experience. Again, fingers crossed,
Well,
I'd love to see it.
they did kind of have that with Alien Earth. It's something we did another
Oh,
podcast
the
episode
press
is
the press thing. I
yeah,
saw some of that. Yeah,
the wreckage site, and
that's
I
right.
was
Yeah,
lucky enough to do the 3 that were in the States,
it's
and
like
yeah.
3 rooms, kind of like outside in a bit, and then through another bit, right?
Yeah, yeah. The one at San Diego Comic Con was a bit more extensive, and yeah, it was almost like a full kind of walk through haunted attraction almost.
That's cool.
So that's like a whole other thing, obviously veering a bit outside of the gaming space and more into just in-person experiences. But sometimes those lines get blurred, you know. Sometimes
Yeah.
you have
Well, like you say with
attractions that are
Descent,
yeah,
it's yeah, on that line.
more interactive, yeah. But as far as is your book Alien the Video Games, when did you have the idea to put this together? Was this something you were inspired by after playing Isolation, or did it come a bit later? Or
I think it was. I mean, let me think. So when Isolation came out, 2014, I was working for a company called Vice. We were setting up their kind of video gaming arm, which became this sort of sub brand called Waypoint. Um, Vice still puts out video game stuff, but it's absolutely nothing to do with any of the original team. They all moved on. Um, but we would, quite often mark Alien Day, right? We do, as you would as a website. Here's 5 games you can play in Alien Day. It's not just Isolation. There's also Alien Trilogy, or there's also Aliens Infestation. Back when it didn't cost an arm and a leg to buy, I think I bought my copy of that for £6 or something ridiculous like that. Again, pre the brand being where it is now, and pre that game being as well known as it is. And kind of off the back of that, I started realizing that there was all these different versions of the same game, in so much as there was several versions of Alien 3, right? And then at some point, either during COVID sort of lockdown period or just after, I was like, yeah, I mean, I want to do something on this, right? I want to write a proper article interviewing people about Alien 3 and like throwing up all the differences. Cause I was like, you'd see some other kind of summaries around these Alien Day pieces elsewhere, right? And they'd be like, Alien 3 is, came out on Game Boy instead of Mega Drive. And I'm like screaming at my screen going, those are different games. That is not the same game. So it came from a place of annoyance, but also that kind of like, if I'm interested in this, maybe other people are too. And it's not just an article, it's like a book. You know, do I want to do 5,000 words just on Alien 3, or do I want to do 55,000 words and I cover all the official games and as many unofficial things as I can fit in there? So I'd say maybe 2022 is probably when I first started thinking about it. And I was doing some other books at that time. So I didn't have the bandwidth at all to even think about it. Got a new job in 2023, and when that happened, I wasn't working in the games media anymore. I moved into I've had a few PR gigs over the years, and in early 2023 I moved to a company and was doing PR for God, who were doing like 2K. We're doing some stuff with Bungie, so we're working on Destiny, a little bit of Warner Brothers. So we were seeing Suicide Squad stuff and looking at it, going, "Oh dear, this game doesn't look very good, does it?" If any listeners know about that one, it didn't come out so well. But yeah, I wasn't scratching that creative writing itch at that point, right? I'd left the games media, so I pitched this book around, and then yeah, publisher was like, "Sounds cool, we'll have some of that." And I just sort of went from there, really. Built it up over a couple of years, finished it in the summer of 2025, and now it comes out in the summer of 2026. That's just the turnaround time for getting X amount of books um, finalized, printed, and sent wherever they need to be around the world. So yeah, it kind of goes back to that first game experience. It's Alien 3, and that realization that there isn't this book isn't out there. Quite a lot of the times, if you want to look up a big series or something, there's a book for that. And there were videos, obviously lots of YouTube videos showing Alien games, and that's cool. I love that. Show me the footage. That looks cool. I'll go play that. But I want to speak to, the people behind it. Why did you come at this game from this angle? Why didn't you just make Alien 3 about Ripley running around with a flaming mop, which was one of my favorite quotes from the book, when they're reading the script to start with, they're like, there are no guns in this. What do we do? How do we make a video game about this? And yeah, that's just how it's come out. And it's a little bit longer. Actually, it's not as long as I'd like it to be. I could have done a lot more, but it's longer than was originally contracted. So I managed to squeeze push the word count up and get some more games in there, get some more interviews in there. But eventually, you've got to kind of put a cap on it and go, that's it. That's the words done. And that was last summer. And I've just been waiting ever since. The worst bit when you write a book is that bit in between. The planning of it is fun. If it gets picked up, obviously that's great. The writing of it, the doing the interviews, that's so much fun. I love speaking to these people. I love putting these like chapters together. And then you check it and you get illustrations, you get screenshots, and you send it all off, and then you wait and you think, oh no, everything I've done is rubbish. Everyone's going to hate this, right? That's when those thoughts start coming in. So I'm really like happy now that it's like hitting, it's up for pre-orders and stuff, and like people are starting to see it. Like I've sent it to a few people in the press, a few other people, for promotional opportunities. Obviously, I had a really lovely message sent back from a real legendary games journalist by the name of Jazz Rignall. He like set up meme machines, just like absolutely legendary guy. And he was like, it's really rare with his experience that he reads a video gaming book and learns something, but like he did this time. And I was like, yes, we got him. We got him.
That's awesome. So given how, important Alien 3 is for you in all of this, there's a number of different iterations of that in the gaming space. Is there a favorite of yours, or one that you would say is the best out of all the Alien 3s?
I mean, of the four, let's say, distinct experiences, I know that, let's say, Mega Drive, just to encapsulate all of the kind of prisoner saving side-scrolling ones, and the SNES one, I know they're both side-on action games, essentially, but I think the SNES does edge the Mega Drive one for atmosphere, for and this is a very loose accuracy, but accuracy to the movie. It does end with a queen alien being pushed into a furnace, which is there or thereabouts. In fact, it ends with your Ripley falling into the furnace as well, which is something none of the other Alien 3 games do. I mean, Alien 3 The Gun doesn't even have Ripley in it, but Alien 3 The Gun is definitely the most fun. Like, but if I'm going to play one of these games like right now, I mean, to be fair, where I'm thinking I've got half an hour to kill, that's the one I'm putting on. Slightly naughtily downstairs in my little games room on, via emulation means, because I don't have Alien 3 The Gun in my basement as much as I'd love to. I play it like a lot of people would have to play it these days. But that's just such a good game, such a fun, silly game. I love it. You're just like, just a basic ass grunt marine, and we're on the Sulaco again, because of course you are. Why wouldn't you be? Why wouldn't that Sulaco be absolutely rammed to the gills with eggs everywhere? Don't question it, just go with it. But if you've got time on your hands and the means to play it, the SNES one is, I think, really, really immersive, very engaging in a way that probably the other two aren't. The Game Boy one has a lot of merits going for it. Like, it's a bit like 1987's Aliens, the computer game, in so much as if you don't know what you're doing, you get lost pretty quickly. But if you work it out, if you stick with it, if you read a few guides, then that's pretty rewarding as well. And it's pretty much like the work of 2 or 3 people. But yeah, the Gun for fun, SNES for atmosphere, Game Boy for the weird one.
I never got past the first 5 minutes of the Game Boy game. I just could not understand what I was supposed to be doing in that thing.
It's got some really unintuitive controls, in so much as like you have to look for key cards and you have to like go into the menus and basically select look at, and then you'll see a thing and then you can take it.
You mentioning that in the book was like, Oh, I might get this out and give it another
Yeah.
go now.
Well, I mean, the guy who programmed it, Jazz Austin, who I got to speak to in it, like, he came from that background of like kind of he was thinking like more text adventures, but like applying that to an action game format. So it definitely is a quirky one. I think one of my favorite little anecdotes that came out of talking to people for that game though is how it kept coming back from QA, like marked as wrong because it was developed in London. And so when they have the little, pop-up screen of the Warden Andrews going, this is rumor control. Of course, they spelt it the English way, the British way, and Nintendo QA were like, no, no, change it, lose the U, and they sent it back, like, no, lose the U. So in the end, Bits in London, the little studio that made it, had to kind of concede defeat. But I love the fact that that's what Nintendo was getting picky about. How dare you have a British actor in a British-made game use a vowel? Good little likenesses as well in those little,
Yeah, I
kind of like
remember the
static
cuts.
cutscenes. Yeah.
I remember them looking good. Otherwise, I only actually played the Mega Drive version. I never got chance to play the SNES one, and I really need to because it just seems like the technically superior, and mechanically superior version of the
It's
game.
it's it's got its downsides. Like Ripley's really floaty in it. Like the jump is ridiculous. Um, so she doesn't control. I would say the controls are a lot tighter in the Mega Drive game, but the music and the atmosphere in the SNES one is terrific. It has dynamic music, so the music will change depending on like what's on screen. Sometimes I think it only has about 25 minutes of music in the whole game, but like it kind of things rise up and down in the mix depending on what's going on. It's really really
Which
little clever system.
wasn't common at the time, was it? I mean,
No, no.
it is now, but for the
Yeah.
time,
It's also got the if you die, it's got the game over man
yes,
sample at
yeah.
the end, which was not cleared. So as I say in the book, like Probe, the developers of that game, sent a cartridge off to be approved that didn't have that, and then sent the cartridge off to manufacture that did have it. So it's just how gaming was back in the 90s. Just like, yeah, sure, we want to do that. Why would anyone be upset that we wouldn't get like, clearance to use a sample from a movie that this game is not based on?
It was, I mean, from our own speaking to game developers, just even in the 2000s, it was such a cowboy kind of era, and to go back even further, yeah.
I
So
mean, from the movie kind of license holder perspectives, they often didn't care, or they had very little interest in what was going on. That's what came through a lot in the interviews with people from the 90s games. Is like, oh, so how much, like, how on top of you were Fox in terms of what you could and couldn't do? And loads of people said they weren't. They literally just left us to it, which just would not happen now at all. Can you imagine? Disney just going, yeah, make an alien game. Now we don't really care what it is. Just make it cool. No, you'd have to jump through so many hoops to like get approvals to so much as like, we want this face hugger to be, pink. No, no, you can't. Sorry. But pink fits the story. It's like because it's from this, it's born from whatever. No, not having it.
So one of the things I noticed when I went through your book that I found was kind of interesting is I fully expected to just have this be in chronological order, but it's not. You do it kind of in order of the different films, and then you kind of have other sections after that, the ones that aren't based on the films, Alien versus Predator, etc. So why did you decide to put it in the order of the films rather than just fully chronological?
I just asked a few people to be fair. When it came to like, I'd obviously writing a lot of the chapters independently. And then just, I could do it chronologically, but then it's going to be here's an aliens game, here's another aliens game, here's another with different experiences in between. And that's before you get to the AvP games as well, which is like, okay, well, if I do it chronologically, are they going to be mixed up in this or not? And there's very few games that have that kind of through thread narratively. There aren't like really many, not all that many kind of like direct sequels and things. So I figured from a, I guess, kind of more casual reader perspective, like let's say you like the Alien series, Alien vs Predator and things, but video games, you're aware of them, but you like this book more from a I like Alien perspective, right? Putting them in movie order to me made a lot more sense. So Isolation arrives very early in the book, whereas something like the Probe Alien 3 games are much 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 further back, and then of course the AvP games come after that. So your SNES one that you mentioned earlier, whether you can like slide kick all the aliens to death as a predator. I kind of have like a real soft spot for that game. It's both so bad, but also kind of good bad in a weird way. Um, they come a lot later on, so it's really just like, hello friend, I'm doing this book. Do you think I should do it this way or that way? And the feedback being, well, I want to read about all the games of a particular movie, so I want them in one place. So yeah, that was it really.
Fair, that makes sense. It did trip me up a few times actually as I was going through it, because I was like, Mike, how dare you forget about Alien Blackout when that didn't come up after Isolation? But yeah, I get you thinking there. So here's something I'm very curious about. Speaking of Blackout, what game do you find to be the most underrated of everything? Whenever you talk Alien, we're always going to be on about how awesome Isolation is, how awesome, the narrative thread of AvP 2 is, the huge impact of Jaguar's AvP and shifting all the perspectives. But what's the one that's not appreciated enough for you?
I mean, you're right to kind of mention Blackout. It's hard because obviously you can't easily play Blackout now, but as a concept, it kind of uses that Five Nights at Freddy's. You're in one place all the time. Stuff is happening on a map effectively, and you can see things through a camera and tell people where to go and when to like hide and all the rest of it. I think that's a really good idea, like as a concept for the game, and the fact that you're in the vents, and the alien can also be in the vents. So you've got to like close things if they're coming towards you. It's a game you had to play with headphones on, really, so you could tell which direction the alien was coming.
Absolutely.
It got some really terrible reviews, and I think that's, again, we talked earlier on about resurrection and how you might appreciate that relative to other movies rather than in and of itself. And I think Blackout suffered for obviously being out after Isolation, and this desire, this appetite for more Isolation, which it wasn't. I mean, it was survival horror, but from a very, very different genre perspective. So that's actually a really good call out. It's not what I wrote down in terms of underrated games. I mean, I think I would have probably said Infestation before it kind of took on this second life as this DS must play. As I said earlier, when I picked that up in the middle tens, like not when it had come out, been out for a few years. I got it secondhand for, it can't be more than £6, and I'm pretty sure it's gone up to sort of £50-60 these days. Just a really, really cool aliens adjacent, tough Metroidvania, like permadeath mechanics. The developers at Way Forward really got it. They got the mood right. Like, it's this 2D Nintendo game. Why is this so atmospheric and so good most of the time? And there's some dodgy bits in it, some bosses that don't quite work, and these silly robots that just get on your tits. But it is a really, really, really accomplished game. But it's also a game that, again, mostly through emulation, I think people have kind of caught up with. My other note actually for underrated is, and we talked about it earlier, Alien 3 on Game Boy. When you know what you're doing in that, it becomes pretty compelling. It is one that you definitely need help to get started with. But again, like a game made by a really small team in not that much time. It was a project that was started and kind of stalled, and then they brought someone back onto the project to kind of help finish it. It's a movie license game at a time when movie license games were not great, especially not on the very basic Game Boy. But I think it achieves quite a lot for what it is, and I think if you're willing to kind of give it the time to go back to, it's pretty decent. I didn't write it down here, but I'll shout out Requiem on PSP as well. It's definitely got its flaws. Like, the combat's really floaty, and it suffers, as a lot of PSP games do, for not having like good camera control. It's fine, like use the shoulder buttons, and it's okay. But again, like, the team that made that was not particularly experienced at making action games. They really, really struggled with scripts and having access to scripts and knowing what was going on in the film. So you have like some locations are the same, some are different. I like how that game has like split paths.
The
You can,
branch, yeah.
it branches off. again, I think it's pretty decent. And that they were. It sucks at the end. Like it sucks at the end where you get to fight a helicopter. But there is a reason for that. They wanted to have the Predalien. Why wouldn't you? And Fox were freaking out because the game was going to come out before the movie, and it was going to have a Predalien in it, and they said you can't do that. You're going to spoil the movie. And so they rushed to get rid of this Predalien. I think there's a Queen Alien at the end
At
that
the
kind of
end
comes
under the
bursting
rubble.
through, which is just it's like a downscaled version of another asset that Rebellion had. Like it's not even like made for that game, that Queen Alien. It's just like we need something, stick that in. And then the guy I was talking to about it, he's like, of course they go and they get the first trailer for AvP Requiem, and it's got the Predalien in it, like before their
Mm.
games come out, so it's already given away. So they could have, I feel for them, but again, that almost speaks to like how this, big film company, they don't really care about the video game at that point that much. Like a lot has changed through the tens, but yeah, I think that game doesn't necessarily get the fair crack it deserves.
It's funny. I say funny in not a ha ha way, but the Rebellion had to suffer that when the previous film, the previous AVP, the novelization of it came out like a month or two before the film did. So anybody who cared enough about the franchise had gone and picked up the book and already read through the fucking events of the film.
I mean, I love that. I mean, most films that come out today, you've got a good idea of the synopsis, or you've probably seen three trailers that give most of it away anyway. I don't think many of us, or maybe it's just me speaking. Sometimes I don't care about spoilers. Sometimes I'm like, I kind of want to know what happens so that I can see it. But maybe not everyone thinks that
I
way.
think that's Aaron.
That's
I've never gotten the impression you care much for spoilers, Aaron. You just want to know everything if it's to be
well, I
known.
mean, it's a different conversation about the way that internet entertainment journalism has sort of evolved as well. Because in the noughties it was all about getting those spoilers. It was all about knowing um, the scoops of what was going to be going off in those films, and the audience cared. We were whores for that sort of advanced knowledge, and that's not the way that things are now. It's very much an anti spoiler culture, and experiencing it as you experience it. But I'm I'm an old bloke, and I still sort of just crave the spoilers.
I think for video games it's harder because it takes longer, right? If a movie's been out 3 or 4 days and you couldn't squeeze 2 hours into your schedule, then stay off the internet. But I do sometimes think with video games, people could be a little bit more courteous sometimes when a 60-hour game is spoiled for you on weekend one. Like I don't appreciate that very much. Still play the things, but see in the end.
What about you, Adam? Is there any underrated?
I'd have to say PS1 Alien Resurrection. I think that game is often disregarded just because of its difficulty. And yeah, that's a huge issue that does kind of sabotage the game as a whole, unfortunately. But if you can get beyond that, either with cheats or just by being a trooper and getting through it, there's a really cool alien survival horror game under that problem.
Do you not think that's hit a point where it's been reevaluated, though?
Maybe it has. It's just in almost every talking about that game instance I've seen, it's always been like, oh, it's so hard. It's like, yeah, that's the issue. But I think you're right. I think it is more appreciated now than it was back in the day. It's just one of those games I would so love to see a remaster re-release with some tweaks of the difficulty, because I think it would be very appreciated.
It suffered a lot, Resurrection, for coming out when it did. You got your PS2 is out, basically. This is coming right at the tail end of PlayStation. It went through a torrid development period, where they kind of changed styles a few times. I mean, Alien Isolation changed styles as well, but they had a little bit more time on it. Well, Alien Isolation actually ran over development-wise by quite a bit. But
and just like Isolation, this went from third person to first person.
Yeah, totally, yeah. Well, I mean, Resurrection went from more of a top-down perspective to the first-person perspective you see. And, they talk about, like, that was the eureka moment. Like, as soon as you put the camera there, they're like, yes, that's what we're doing. And having to go in and sell that to the publisher and basically say, we need more time to do it, though. I mean, if you listen to what some people at the studio say, they hate that game because it lost them so much money. But like you say, I think it's been reassessed. If you can play it now, great. I mean, it runs on a PS3. People still have PS3s, right? Knocking around. It won't run in your PS5, but anything from PS3 downwards, it'll be fine in.
That's one I've actually not played. I missed out on Resurrection, and I just never. I've brought it. I've just never gave it the time to play it through. Again, because of the infamous difficulty of it, and I have less patience with older games, which is
Just
terrible for me.
throw it on a dark night and just look up the cheats and put in invincible mode and just do it for the atmosphere.
But do any of the cheats even come close to pink acid boots? No,
Not in the same way, no. But like Adam says, it very much has to. It's hard and very unforgiving. Even the face huggers in it are horrible, and like in most games they're just like nothing, but they're horrible in that game.
Although the idea of the mechanic of being able to get to a removal point, whatever they called them in the game, to actually remove the chest bursters, I think sounds really interesting. At least lore speaking, mechanically speaking there.
Yeah, definitely. And just not that it really matters as from a first person perspective, but you're not just Ripley in this game, so that's fun as well. One of the more fun things that came up in conversations around that game, though, was how one of the artists refused to work on the newborn. I love that. Like he hated that so much that he was like, I'm not touching that. Someone else in the team can build that.
Well, you do fight the queen in it as well. That is another boss fight, so she's not just immobile like she is in the film. Aaron, I'm ashamed to admit I had to remind myself of the pink acid boots thing. And yes, that is a quote, or that is a cheat code from Alien Trilogy, which was I got pink acid
boots on.
And that is to activate all weapons and invincibility. It is a classic, widely remembered cheat code from the era that games that grants full invulnerability to acid and damage.
So I think I spoiled what I think is a very underrated game, and that is Blackout. Mike's point is bang on. We were at a point where people are going, "Oh, what did Isolation do?" And that's all you ever used to fucking hear about any potential game post Isolation. But I think that game was very effective at still being a horror survival horror thing. The sound design in it was fantastic. Yes, like Mike said, the headphones had to be on. You had to listen for the alien in the vents getting close to you. I'd never played any Friday night at Freddy's.
Five Nights at Freddy's.
Five Nights at Freddy's.
I'll be honest, I've not either. Like, I was literally like, oh, this is based on that, is it? Or it's like gameplay similar to that. Cool. Well, obviously that's a touch point for a lot of people, but yeah, no, I hadn't played one of those.
So I went into it blind and I played it and I was like, this is fucking brilliant. This is really suited to Alien mechanically. And the team that worked on it, I forget the developer's name. They were a European one, if I remember rightly. But you could tell they were genuinely interested in the franchise and in actually being a spiritual sort of sequel to Isolation. And I think they had. So I played it on, I think, an S8, and I was like, no, this needs to be bigger. So I played it on one of the tablets, and it was a bit better, but it was sometimes a little fiddly, with your input, with your screen size, when you got fat fingers. And it wasn't until I played it via BlueStacks that it wasn't frustratingly difficult because of, again, the fingers and the input. But I was like, you know what? There's a lot of good foundation here to do something a bit more complicated and a bit more involved in some of your distractions, things like and distractions that could potentially impact the map a bit more. So, things like depressurizing areas of the map, opening airlocks, environmental gases like you see at the end of Alien when Ripley's in the shuttle and getting Big Chap out of his little hidey hole. I was like, there's a lot of stuff here that they could work on to make this feel a bit more involved and a bit more expanded. And I'm sad that was not followed up with on. I'm sad that people did not give it the go that it deserved.
It's a strong concept, and I quite enjoyed it. I played it on my iPad. There's another sci-fi video game called Observation. And I think if you took something like that and added like blackout vibes, that could make for a really intriguing.
You talk about Observation, the isolation. Oh, John McKellen.
John
Yes.
McKellen,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Who's now making Silent Hill Townfall.
That's right. That looks very impressive. I've been getting more into the Silent Hill franchise as of late.
With one of the guys on his team is the lead environment artist from Isolation as well. So nice little, getting the team back together there. Yeah.
Adam Wayne Ellis says, "For shame, Adam, at not knowing the cheat code."
Yeah, I know. Fake fan, as you say, right?
I do like to throw that one at you. Observation was really good. I remember the first time leaving the ship and seeing Saturn on the screen. I was like, this is incredible. It was one of those trippy moments where it like Alien AvP and running as the alien. It sort of hit me perceptually like that, and that was a great game.
It's the second time in a week for me that Observation's come up. This must be encouraging a replay or something. But yeah, just a final point on Blackout. I think one of the main problems it had, it wasn't so much that it came straight after Isolation, but because it had Amanda Ripley in it, right? If it was anyone else as the protagonist and it was a separate thing, would have gone down a lot better. I think it's just that kind of like, why have we gone from X to Y in this way? I'd actually love to see some of it like incorporated as kind of like, I can imagine it like as almost like a mini game section in a bigger game, a bigger experience. In another a throw forward in the next AAA sort of Alien game if one comes along. Well, obviously Isolation's coming along. Isolation sequel to. But there's definitely components like mechanics in that where you can, imagine like logging onto a screen somewhere where another bit of the ship or something, and you have to do that to like open another area or like save those people so they can get you. There's real opportunity there, but that's what happens. Sometimes games come out and they've got a great core idea, a great central premise, and they don't quite make the mark. But like developers remember, right? And they'll revisit those mechanics later on. So who knows? Who knows what we'll see down the line?
So, Aliens Colonial Marines. I first remember this game. I had a subscription to Game Informer, and it had that incredible cover story where it was on the cover, and it was kind of announcing that Sega had acquired the license. It also hinted at some of the other Alien games coming, and I was just blown away by the screenshots, quote unquote screenshots, that they had in this article announcing this game. And little did we know it would be a long ass wait after this article in Game Informer came out. And there would eventually be some drama as to this demo they showed at E3. That was this very impressive demo, and the final game, the demo did not really represent that game, and it led to lawsuits and all that. And even with the abysmal reviews, we still played it. We played it co-op for the first time on Xbox 360, Aaron, and we still had a fun time with it, I would say. And I have found the multiplayer to be fun since. To me, it's almost kind of like a sci-fi museum, like just getting to go around the Hadley's Hope colony. Even before like Isolation, some of the multiplayer maps, like there's this Nostromo map that I would just like to walk around. And speaking to Alien 3 as well, like getting to walk around the, Fury prison and just have the candles and all the atmosphere with that. There's elements of Colonial Marines like that really shine for me. Overall, I think it's safe to say probably disappointment for all of us, but that game had its moments. It's just a shame that Gearbox did not put in all the love they professed for it.
It's one of these, classic. It changed hands a few times. People were on the team and they left the team and they brought other people in. it dragged, like you said, it was. I mean, you got to remember, there was a Colonial Marines game announced before this Colonial Marines game. There was a game in the pipes for a long time, and yeah, it just smacks of great ambition unrealized, and from all accounts, so you just give one that as a multiplayer game to play with your friends, a crew of people who really dig Aliens, it's fine, it's fun. It wasn't the kind of late 360 PS3 era definitive shooter that maybe it had been set up to be, but it definitely doesn't deserve a level of the hate that got thrown at it. Like the bad review, negative reviews are one thing, but I think if it was really that game's release really coincided with what I witnessed, at least in gaming, way more toxicity in like communities, or like your social media, etc. And they weren't shy to like slide into developer DMs and not just tell them what they thought, but what they thought they should do with their lives, etc. In a really negative way, and I think that's bad. People have pretty much got trauma off the back of working on that game. I mean, there's no one who I approached who worked on that game who wanted to be quoted by name in the book. Like one person told me, and well, I mention it, but not by name. That it's the worst thing they ever worked on. You know, and that's not because it was a terrible game. It's just the stress of doing it, the stress of promoting it. What came afterwards, not a lot of fun, which is a real shame. Because, like you say, it's not a terrible game. It has its moments. It has its environments. I think what they did in the DLC with Hicks is actually fine. It's a nice little like what if, right? We love a what if. I think that's fine. Maybe it's a game that is due a reassessment if it's not already getting one. Now that we're what 12, 13 years on from is it that long? Goodness me. Get from
Yeah.
from the fact, we can look at it with a bit, with greater clarity, and really think about what was going on at the time and the hardships they had to overcome to even ship that game. So, I think it deserves more than what it gets, but not a good game by any stretch of the
I
imagination.
agree. I would still like to see a documentary of the money that went to Borderlands that was supposed to go to Colonial Marines. Regardless, I think Timegate, you got to credit them a lot for this too. Like I remember them from the Fear expansions, and they've done some awesome shooter work. And I believe they mostly did the single player stuff as well as the DLC campaigns, which I quite liked. The DLC campaigns, I thought they were cool and atmospheric and leaned into the horror a bit more. I do think you're right. The game did have some patches. It's had some community mods. You can change a typo in the game files, which will make it a little bit better.
That's right.
But I've never hated Colonial Marines. I was severely disappointed by it based on what I was expecting after reading that article in Game Informer all those years ago. But I think it's worth playing through, especially with friends, for sure.
Yeah, as a co-op shooter, I think it's a perfectly fun way to spend a few evenings if you can still play it online. I have no idea if you can.
Yeah.
There's probably a way somehow.
It's
It's on PC, isn't it? So
it's peer to peer anyway. So
yeah.
it
Oh,
doesn't
right. Okay.
matter.
Yeah. It's all good.
I don't hate it, but it's one of those ones where I'm kind of like, was it even meaningful it coming out? Yeah, it's a miracle that Timegate actually got it out. Yeah, it's a miracle that Gearbox wrangled it at the end of it. But at the end of the day, it's still a mess. And that whole typo speaks to, I think, the game, such a careless mistake to make. And it might be spiteful, but I refuse to purchase any Gearbox games now. That is the only principle I hold on to as a nerd. It's just to not buy any Gearbox stuff. And it's kind of a shame because I'd love to get I think they put out Sins of a Solar Empire remastered or something, and I was very interested in finding the space RTS. I grew up on Duke Nukem, which is really bad to say thinking about it. I was 5 years old playing Duke Nukem and Doom, and Duke Nukem is not a very good adult role model to have. But like, I refuse to touch any of the release stuff for them because I just will not give Randy Pitchford any of my money anymore. And
That's
that
part of the
is
problem. Like Randy Pitchford was very aggressively kind of you're wrong to press about that game.
mm,
You know, he was. I mean, I understand a defensive position, but he was probably a little bit like, went a bit too far, and definitely rubbed a lot of people in the games media up the wrong way. And whatever influence the games media had then or has now, there's a sour taste from that game with quite a few people who, again, like you say, maybe look at Gearbox software games through the lens of, we remember that period. I haven't played a Borderlands game since the first one, so I don't actually know how good or not they are. I mean, they've made 4 of them, right, and spin-offs. It's doing all right. Clearly people love it. Although I have seen the movies arrived on Netflix now. I don't think I'll subject myself to that.
oh, well, the film press had the same sort of experience with Pitchford there, didn't they?
Oh, did they? Was it?
Yeah, everybody was slating it, and he was there doing
It's like,
his
you're wrong.
yeah.
Oh well.
I find it disappointing because Colonial Marines is a cursed name, full stop. You mentioned the Czech 6 game. That was one I remember being announced in the early days of the internet online fandom and being quite excited for. There was a comic by Dark Horse that was called Colonial Marines as well, and that went through a fair bit of creative difficulty towards the end of that. And that was a comic series that was cut short by 2 issues. It was supposed to be a 12-issue run, and they only gave it 10, and the whole end of that's a bit of a convoluted little mess. But it's a shame that I had not been given that squad-based shooter that everybody promised me. And then there were interesting mechanics in it. It was the first game, I think, to do motion tracker as a separate item, which is, even back then, I was like, what, this is really good. This really good, simple mechanic that will do wonders to tension and to your gameplay experience. And then we fast forward to Rogue Incursion, last year before, where it's a physical thing that you're holding in your hand separately in VR. This simple little change that this really awful game played with earlier, but has been picked up by a much more impactful, meaningful game. But no, I will still never forgive Gearbox and Randy Pitchford for that stupid game, even if it wasn't awful. It was still, like Adam said, it was disappointing. I think I ended my review of that game with something along the lines of, I feel like that parent, this child has been, you can't hate it or disown it, but you're just like, I'm really, really disappointed in you right now.
I was quite a early Wii U adopter. There are some of us out there, and I stand by that system. So I was slightly disappointed that Colonial Marines didn't, it got cancelled for Wii U, right? But like you talk about the motion tracker and stuff. That's the ideal platform, with the second screen to really do something interesting
Absolutely.
there. Shame they didn't do it, but like you say, I mean, Rogue Incursion has nailed it. I haven't actually played Rogue Incursion in VR, but I have played it in its, oh goodness me, whatever its
Evolved
edition is called,
edition.
Evolved Edition. Thank you. And even then, like, you have to treat these things as quite separate elements. It's yeah, pretty cool. I don't know if I could take that in VR. I mean, I'm nearly 46. I'm like, my heart might burst.
It's great in VR. I played through it in PS VR too, and I just thought it was a fantastic experience. Again, a very survival horror feeling alien game, reminding me of things like Resurrection, where you can kill the aliens, unlike Isolation, but it's still, it can be tough, and it's very survival horror feeling.
It's encouraged that you don't make a whole lot of noise, that's for sure. So yeah, if you're unloading a few clips at something, then something else might hear that. Yeah, or at least that's what the game wants you to think. There's magic and smoke and mirrors and things, but
Yeah, we almost got our hands on a work in progress build for the Czech 6 game that I think was one of the ones from E3, and I should have just gave the guy however many hundreds he wanted on eBay. I was trying to negotiate with him a little bit, and then he just disappeared and never could get a hold of him after that. But there was some footage shown there that I had not seen before, and I think it would have only been like 3 levels that were completely broken, and I would have had to find myself a PS2 dev kit to even play it or something like that. But I always regret not just, here you go, ship it out to me, but
I mean, these, if they're not online somewhere, they will inevitably find their way online. A bit like the links AvP, which you can find in places nowadays. Which again, it's not full game at all. It's
No.
like walk forward a bit, turn right. That's about what you get.
So speaking of the ease of accessing games, I guess, Mike, you've mentioned while we're talking here, naughty ways to play the games. You talked about it in the book, and this is something that Adam is actually very, very passionate about himself. And, that is the issue of video game preservation, accessibility. And, when you're working on this book, you are going all the way back to the fucking Commodore 64. You are when that bit late early 80s, late 90s. This is
Early 80s, yeah.
old hardware. Did that make it hard for you while you were actually working on the book to be able to go and experience? It's one thing to not be able to go like do Descent, but at least you've got good accounts of it, and you can reference that and lean on that for what you're working on. But gaming is an interactive media. It is that experience that we have, but it's not so easy to do that all the time. So was that a difficulty when you were writing, when you were trying to get that first-hand experience?
So, sometimes, I mean, there are definitely some of the old Java games that don't get a lot of time in the book, and that's not just because they're small; it's because I couldn't play them. There's a few really, really old ones that I didn't get proper hands on with. But I have the means here to use a Spectrum, to use a C64, so I can use that original software, run it, and play it that way. With the old Kempton joysticks and things. Trying to play Aliens, the computer game, the US one. I hate that game so much. Well, I don't hate it, but like that game starts with like a landing sequence, like when they're going down to LV-426. I found it so hard, so hard with this old joystick, but we got there in the end. But yeah, I mean, on the we talked about it. We talked about emulation. There's a fine. Well, I don't know. Sometimes emulation and preservation feel like the same thing when the company that owns the rights to the game or doesn't, or you don't know who owns the rights to the game, shows no interest in it, right? That's not hurting anyone. I think it's good that old games that people want to explore are available. There is in my head like quite a clear marker where that becomes piracy that's damaging to an industry that you can say it makes billions and millions of dollars. It does, but a lot of studios are not, doing huge revenues and need every penny and pound they can get, to cover production costs and things. So if we're talking several generations ago, I don't see any harm. If you wanted to play like AvP on Jaguar nowadays, right, you're going to have to pay a lot of money to get a Jaguar and to get that game. I think that game, a few years ago, you could pick up copies for 20 quid or something. Probably more like 80 these days, 80 to £100. Oh, boxed, yeah.
It's about 120-ish.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. So people are getting priced out. A lot. I mean, prices went up around lockdowns. People started like realizing that they were bored and they had money, and so like basically everything retro gaming wise went up in price. So that's hard, and if you can find a way to play that and you want to play that, like that's not pinching Rebellion's bottom line. They're not putting that game out. It would have been really cool if there was a way that Atari or Digital Eclipse could have made that game available on the Atari 50 compilation. It feels like that's a really key Jaguar game that's not on that compilation, but I understand why, right? And you've got things like you mentioned it, Adam, the AvP arcade game, the Capcom game. I would so love for Capcom to put that on one of its collections. It's literally got like belt scrolling, beat 'em up collections out there. And they did their Capcom, I never remember if it's Stadium Arcade or Arcade Stadium, one of the two, like 2 volumes of it. Really, really great compilations. And for whatever reason, whatever licensing reason, it's not on there. You can get it on the Capcom Home Arcade stick, which is how I play it. I've got that. And but that's the only official home version of it. So I've definitely played that game emulated, because how else am I going to do it, right? Capcom's not going to come for me. Capcom would have loved to put that out on home media, but they were constantly told no, like, we don't want that. Like, they tried to like do it for 32X. They wanted to do it like in the sort of very, very early noughts, bring it back, and we're told no, 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 that's not what Alien versus Predator is now. Like, we've moved on from 2D side-scrolling games. We don't want that now. But yeah, it's just kind of par for the course in working around retro games, is you're going to have to kind of, go into that gray area. I don't think it's a morally gray area though for a lot of people. Like, you know when you're stealing something, right? And you know when you're just experience something that you couldn't get anywhere else. So I think that's the difference. I'm not bloody running some pirate copy of Dark Descent, or something
Yeah.
like that, But you know, the Alien from 1982. Yeah, I'll run a little file of that on my what do you call it? Like, Spectrum emulation box downstairs, sort of thing. I've got a couple of those like mini Spectrum things. There was one that came out the other year, and there was one before it that you could like add games to. So, it is proper hardware, and it literally says like add your own games to it. So go nuts.
Yeah, that Capcom home arcade stick was super frustrating to me because they did not release that in the United States, and the big exclusive game they had was Aliens versus Predator. And when they first announced that, I was like, "Oh, finally, they're going to release this. Maybe they'll have some little exclusivity window for this arcade stick thing, whatever. I won't buy that, but maybe like next year they'll release it." And haven't seen it, so it is very frustrating. And yeah, game preservation is something I'm very passionate about. Physical media. I mean, we see with over reliance on streaming services now, as well as even some games we purchase digitally. At any time, these companies can just pull the rug
Well,
from us. And
I mean, just this week, Aliens Fireteam Elite on the Switch.
yeah, the Switch version is because the Switch One hardware was pretty power limited. There were a few Switch games, including some Resident Evil ones, that were the cloud versions of the game, which I've tried cloud gaming. I can never do it because there's just always the latency. Even if I am like hardwired into the internet, I still notice the hiccups and the buffering shit. Like, I don't want to deal with that when I'm playing a video game. So I do appreciate these retro collections and remasters and re-releases that come out. Studios like Aspire and Night Dive that'll put out like really beautifully you know remastered versions of these games, like the Turok games that Night Dive has done, or The Thing, or even something older like Dark Forces. Just the amount of care they put into those, I'm so wanting to see that for some of the older catalog of Alien, Predator, and AvP games, and even some stuff on mobile, like you had mentioned Blackout, Aaron. Like, that frustrates me. We can't, unless we emulate it, we can't just go on Steam and play that, because you have to face that, like, only a pretty small percentage of the gaming crowd is going to go through the effort to do emulation on PC. If you have like on a storefront, oh, hey, here's a re-release version of this old retro game, that's where you'll get people to really just buy it and check it out, because it's pretty low effort. But it does make for some tricky situations as well. I think one game we would love to see come back is Alien versus Predator 2. Now, that game is available on PC for free because of the passionate the people at AvP Unknown that have made this available to people, and because of licensing issues with that game, as far as we know, that's why it hasn't been re-released. But if it ever had been if it ever will be re-released, which I would love, I think you still have to have some recognition of that fan group that kept this alive, and you can't just be like, okay, well, we're shutting you down now, because that's messed up, right? So that makes for kind of a tricky situation, I think, in that regard. But I would love to see like an Alien 3 retro collection, right? And just throw in all the versions of Alien 3, and we can play that. Same with AvP, like give us the Capcom and SNES ones as like a 2-pack. And yeah, like AvP Evolution, I played that on iPad. You can't get that on storefronts anymore. So I always like games for younger people to discover, or people just didn't get the opportunity to discover them, to have that opportunity. But games that were important to me, I want to have the convenience of just firing that up in my living room. I don't want to have to like fire up my emulator and make sure everything's like the right settings and shit. Like, I want it to be convenient. And there's companies that do that, and I really hope they get to Alien, Predator, and AvP.
When you think about it in in sort of comparison to film, to books, those classics are always made available again and again and again. Alien has existed on VHS, on Laserdisc, on DVD, on HD DVD. I think AVP came out on, and now Blu-ray. Those other industries, they continually make that stuff accessible, and that's just not the case here, and it's frustrating.
I think even in those spaces now, we're wondering if we'll ever get Alien Earth on physical media, right?
True, yep. But when you bring in the whole streaming thing into it, because we just don't own anything anymore, we just rent it off of these very kind people who let us borrow it, and it's frustrating. Mike, you mentioned Infestation earlier, and one of the things that you think is underrated. I remember getting my review copy of that game, sitting at my desk and playing it and being like, this is awesome. It was a very small nerdy geekasm. That was people probably don't know this, but in this age of the RPG, in this age of Fireteam Elite and the books, that was the first time the Union of Progressive Peoples came back from that script. So as I'm sitting there playing it for the first time, I'm like, they've dived into that well. This is happening. These are here now. And, it's a really good tense game, surprisingly so for a little DS thing. Although when you get the motion tracker, it's kind of not as scary anymore. But that's a whole other thing. But that, every time we post about the anniversary of the release of the game, or we share some of the artwork that was done for it, what the comment is? It's, I'd love to play this game, but I'm not shelling out 80 quid for a second-hand copy of it, and that is absolutely fair, and it's a shame, because it means people aren't able to experience these moments in time in both the evolution of gaming, but in the evolution of the franchise.
It's a tricky one. I mean, on that one, obviously that's a Sega game, Sega published, and Sega still have their fingers in the Aliens IP. So I don't know on that one. I know that Way Forward, or people at Way Forward who are still there who worked on that game, would love to get a second swing at it somehow. I don't know how you go about converting what is a very twin screen experience to a single screen, but there'd be a way. Because that feels like a really great game that's very much a prisoner on that system. Not that getting a DS is difficult, right? They made bloody millions and millions of them.
£30 from CEX.
Yeah, the game itself is a trickier one to pick up. But yeah, and as for AvP, the Capcom AvP, like you're right, when it came on that stick, I was like, oh, that's going to be it. That's the first one, and we're going to see it later on in some kind of other form, even if it's just a digital release or something, or as part of like a beat 'em up collection. But it has kind of surprised me that didn't lead to more. I know that they it's a whole other big discussion, but licensing is tricky, and the idea of licensing something for hardware versus software you play on lots of different devices is very, very different. If anyone's familiar with the Evercade ecosystem, the kind of Evercade retro system, they have got games. In fact, some from Capcom that they only licensed for like pre-installed use on hardware. They've never been able to make those games as a cartridge. So I imagine that's a very similar setup to what happened with the Koch Media, who distributed did that big stick. Probably a similar kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to keep that exclusive Capcom, hit up Arcade 1UP, and I will buy the unit. Just sell it in the US this time, please.
This is it. Like, if they've done the home arcade stick, then that's exactly the kind of partner that they could work with. Yeah, I know nothing on that, by the way. This is not me. This is just pure, like you guys, just pure speculation. But Capcom, I don't know. Capcom's what they're having what Resi Requiem just came out. That's done really well. They got Pragmata this year. we'll see. Are they? I don't think they're feeling very retro at the moment, but we'll see.
They're still releasing some of those arcade collections. I
Are
see
they
those come
digitally?
out. Yeah. Mhm.
Mm.
But yeah, that's another thing Resident Evil fans were clamoring for is like, hey, let us play the first three. And I guess like people try to communicate to that to them and they were a bit confused. They're like, wait, but we've made these remakes that are like the better experiences. And there's people that love those, like myself, but still want to play the older games. And I think that's they worked with goodoldgames.com, which is another great company for game preservation. Um, and they re-released those games on their storefront on PC.
I know
Uh,
they're on PlayStation now as well. Not the first one. Oh no, there is the
right. Two and
direct
three
to
they did
cloud.
release kind of recently. Right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. But
I
it
think
would still be cool to see. I just love what they did with the Tomb Raider remasters because those were games I played growing up, and they have like the old graphics, the new graphics,
mhm.
a photo mode, new features, but they still feel like those same old games you played. And seeing that level of care for some of these retro games like Alien Resurrection, Alien Trilogy, I would so love to see. But that Capcom AvP arcade, man, that is one I would get in a heartbeat as long as it was. You make that available in the U.S. for under $1,000 somehow. I'm getting it.
That is Adam's white whale. It absolutely is.
Even though I can just go online in the internet browser and play it right
Yeah.
now.
I hope it
This
happens, and I hope it has the 3-player. It needs, arcade needs the 3-player mode. Not the Capcom Home Arcade 2-player mode.
There's just something more authentic about playing it on its intended hardware. It's just I don't think it's like a feeling you can quite describe, but to me, it just it's the right way to play it.
I was going to say something like that's why Resident Evil 4 is so good on Wii, but I don't want to upset the listeners.
Hey, I loved Resident Evil 4 on Wii. I
It's
thought
really
I thought
great,
that
but
was
it's
fantastic.
obviously not the original hardware.
Yeah.
But if you stop me in the street and say what's the best original Resident Evil 4, it's I'm going to say Wii. Yeah, they made it work, man. It's
Oh,
just
they did.
magic.
The aiming with that is great. I still want to play through the remake in VR because I haven't done that yet.
So this one is something I'm quite passionate about, and that is the lack of sort of behind the scenes or documentary on the development of video games. And I find it really disappointing that we don't get this sort of intensive um, understanding of the challenges that the devs face or, you know, their experiences on it. And I think that the culture around, discussing video games has changed a lot over the last 10, 15 years, something like that, because, and I think Colonial Marines plays a part in this because after Colonial Marines, all the sort of pre release footage you would see of things now comes with a little tag that says, footage not representative of the final game. And, a lot of that was, a lot of the lawsuit to do with Colonial Marines was around the final result not matching the demo stuff. And I don't know if this is my conspiracy or if I actually read something to do with this, but yeah, I've always understood Colonial Marines as controversy to feed into that. But there's like a lack of willingness to talk about games in development now, because again, I fear it's not. They talk about some feature that doesn't make it into the finished game, and it's going to upset gamers and stuff like that. And like even isolation, 10 years after the fact, I found it really difficult to get people who would be willing to come and talk to us in celebration of the game, to discuss their experiences, to discuss the development of it. How did that impact you, while you were working on the book? Did you still feel that sort of hesitation from people to come and not so much dish the dirt, but talk about their experiences and the way the game's evolved? Is there this unnecessary hesitation and reluctance to document that kind of progression of a video game now?
Somewhat. I mean, when it comes to newer games, there's obviously a lot of NDAs at play. Not even with games that aren't even out yet. you know, you work on a game and you're still under that contract that says you're not allowed to talk about what you did on that game for X amount of years. Obviously, you can in private when you're going on to another job or whatever, and they're going to ask you about what you did on whatever game it was, and you have those conversations. But in terms of like speaking to members of the press or someone like me, absolutely not. You know, and some people respect that, and some people don't. You know, I kind of got lucky in a way that some people spoke to me and then they might have said afterwards, oh, maybe I shouldn't have, but it's too late now, cat's out of the bag, etc. And some people just, you know, left studios or only at that studio for a limited period of time, or that studio's closed now. So as far as they're concerned, you know, they're not damaging anything. um Obviously older games it's not a problem. You know, people love to talk about their things they made in the 90s and reminisce, and you know, share their stories of sleeping under desks and surviving off coffee and cigarettes to make video games. And you listen to that and going, what, in the mid 80s, like people do that now. You know, that's we call it crunch now though, and it's deeply like you're advised against it, but you know, people do. I can't remember where I was the other day, and someone was talking about like, oh yeah, of course we've got a crunch at this stage, and I was thinking, why are you telling me this? Like, don't tell me you're actively crunching. But anyway, yeah, it still happens. Um, but yeah, I mean, there were some companies I ran up against. Like, I wanted to obviously speak to some people at Creative Assembly who are still at Creative Assembly, and that looked like it was going to happen, but it didn't. And I understand why, because they're working on the next game, and you know, there was a very real chance that conversations could have gone in that direction. Something could have been said that shouldn't be said. You know, however guarded you are about something, you know, things can slip out. And when it came to Gearbox, like approaching Gearbox, like I had some initially very positive conversations with people at Gearbox, and then it was just kind of like, no. And the people I did get to speak on Aliens, Colonial Marines, you know, they're not there anymore. I mean, one of those people doesn't even work in games anymore, you know, so they've kind of left. And again, keeping their name off things kind of avoids anything like that. Documentation, I mean, you do get some places that, you know, they love it, they love showing behind the scenes. Like, you know, a game will be announced or be released with accompanying, like, here's an 8-minute video about how he made this game, and it's all very, you know, polished. It's all very, like, you know, it's just telling you the very top line stuff rather than the nitty gritty. But then you get, like, you know, channels like No Clip, for instance, where they do get the luxury of time with people. I mean, they did a thing on Alien Isolation, where you get to like go in and see things. You know, it's through that documentary that's probably the best place to see. I think it's GDC footage of when Alien Isolation was, you know, not the way it was when it was a third person game. And I think it may even have what their first person demo of it, which was the
Yeah.
kind of like the alien, you know, big chap coming down at the end. And that all spun off of that was made really quickly. Again, it's in the book, but like they were working on a completely different sci-fi concept around like a contagious outbreak on the moon, like a sci-fi thing. It was kind of relayed to me as like, you know, this is pre Last of Us, but we were talking about like that sort of similar kind of thing, right? You know, spores and stuff, but at an old NASA base, and that kind of got reworked into that pitch, which I love. You know, stick an alien in
Mm.
it and recreate the, you know, the medical from Alien, and there we go. Um, again, like this is not the point, but like it kind of really surprises me how Sega to Creative Assembly at the time were like quite blasé, quite like lax about Alien. They're like, yeah, we've got the Alien license. Like, do you want to have a crack at it? Like, what would you do? Is that all right? I think they offered Creative Assembly Alien or the Olympics. They had the
Yeah.
rights to the Olympics, and they went, yeah, we'll have a go at Alien.
It's interesting in that early the pitch demo, I guess. It's not Big Chap, but it is like the resurrection style for the
Is it?
xenomorph.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was super impressive. That first demo, I could see why the publisher was sold. But yeah, it can be a tricky thing. I know we've had an easier time talking to some developers than others, Aaron, and I know
Well,
they do have to kind of balance like things usually have to be approved with the publisher, but also the license holder. So those are two major, you know, hoops they have to jump through. That they're some are more nervous than others about tripping up with those.
I mean, I ran into the exact same thing with Creative Assembly, Mike. You know, it looked like we were going to have Al Hope on a retrospective, and then the announcement came, and I was like, okay, we're not having Al Hope on, and that was exactly what happened, and it was disappointing. You know, And it's the it's the most frustrating thing I find about what we do is talking to video game developers. But the most interesting ones are the ones that are unfortunately dead companies. Where it's people are happy to talk about it. We did Adam AvP Extinction. The retro we had with those guys, the retro we had with the Eurocom team about Predator Concrete Jungle. I don't know. I enjoy video games. I want to know about them, and it's a frustration for me not to be able to learn about them and hear people speak about them. But yeah, I get it.
I've always felt, and this runs through like the whole games media side of my career, is like, the greater the transparency on the development of a video game, the more understanding there is, the less likely you're going to get flack when things are not exactly, up to the level of expectation that the end player, the end user, the player has, right? And some companies are really good at communicating that, and others are still very guarded. Um, I'm not tarring them all with the same brush at all, but I find Japanese publishers are very guarded, very old fashioned. So anything that goes through Sega, Capcom, Konami in the past, not so much Nintendo, weirdly, but a lot of the kind of like classic old Japanese publishers, they can be quite like cards to the chest, about stuff. Whereas, a more agile, smaller, often indie studio will be like, yeah, we will show you it's gone from this to this to this to this to this, and you're with us every step of the way. And sometimes they're like, help us test this game, and all those kind of things. Whereas, especially in the AAA space, all that testing is done, you don't know they're doing it. I mean, they're doing it, and they're getting, feedback, and they're getting like predicted scores, and what would you change, and that starts quite early doors. But yeah, it's a lot less transparent. I'm not saying they open that sort of stuff up to the public, but a little bit more of a peek behind the curtain would definitely help. Sorry, when it comes to you know the player setting their expectations on a good level, which obviously played against Colonial Marines. It's fascinating to me actually that since that Isolation sequel announcement, I know we're saying Isolation 2, but I don't think it will be called Isolation 2. It might be, I don't know, but I would find it weird if it was. I'd love to see it be Alien, something that feels more in sync with the brand, right? You don't go like Alien Covenant or Alien Resurrection, etc. But yeah, I'm really surprised we haven't seen anything more of that yet, because expectations and fanciful flights of predictions for that game must be all over the
Yeah.
place right now.
So Wayne on our Patreon said, obviously very happy that we're getting a sequel to Alien Isolation, but I'm worried how they're going to recreate that feeling of constant fear and dread without it feeling like more of the same. So we're already at this point of how the hell are they gonna
Mm,
even match that? Yeah, Blackout might have took some flack for not being Isolation 2, but Isolation 2 has set such a high standard now, and a good chunk of the team who worked on the original game aren't there anymore. Obviously,
yeah,
Al
yeah,
still
gone.
his, and he's still the driving force behind it. But there is a big, a high bar that they're going to have to
Yeah,
deal with, and
like
yeah,
you say, I mean, we mentioned it. Then you've got, John McCallan's got his own studio. The environment artist is obviously working with him. We know that gameplay
Gar-
programmers have moved on.
Gary Napper
Um,
moved away
yeah,
somewhere as well.
yeah, yeah.
Andy
I ran it.
Kelly isn't there any? No, not
The,
Andy Kelly. The AI. Oh, the AI guy.
Well, Clive Lindop's not there. He worked on a lot of the kind of how the alien behaved and stuff. Spoke to, but you say about the sequel, like I mean, the next game, like so he left Creative Assembly in 2015, I think, or like around about the time the game shipped. So he's got no connection to them whatsoever. But like in the book, like I do include like some of his thoughts as to what he would like to do in a sequel, right? Because like it had been announced, like the message had come out on social media, so I had to include it. And he talks about like you could have like this shared collecting of information from different people playing the game, right? So the alien can learn from multiple sources, or like the kind of like the idea of like machine learning and stuff, like so the intelligence of the alien in the game could be far more advanced and a lot more organic than it was in the not scripted in isolation, but it had set routines that would occur in different places, right? So that's really interesting. And he says the really obvious thing in the book that I'm sure a lot of fans of that game would love. It's like, how do you take exactly what you're saying? How do you take the alien of isolation and make it aliens without losing, what makes that game special? So we'll see. I'm very excited for it. Very keen to know how they're going to approach it.
Yeah, that was such a big moment for us last fall on the 10th anniversary. I mean, there were rumors, there was someone saying something was going to happen on Reddit, and sure enough, it did. And it was cool to see Sega celebrating that with all the posts they were doing beyond just the announcement. They had a cool um, ambient lo-fi music thing that was fun, and some artwork, and
I
just
still maintain that sounds more trilogy than isolation, though, that lo-fi thing.
yeah,
The
I could see
Alien
that.
trilogy soundtrack I listen to about once a week.
It is a classic one. Give us a vinyl of that one, please. But yeah, so that was just such a great moment for us fans and as gamers to finally know that that's coming after so long, after feeling that game had eventually become recognized. I think we both say it got some unfair criticism from certain outlets when it came out, but ultimately, I think
Never forget
most.
IGN. Never forget, never forgive.
I think you look at any top horror games of all time list these days that's posted online, and it's right up there. And I think those sales, maybe while they weren't what Sega wanted in the beginning, with it being released on more platforms, word of mouth, with it coming out on mobile with extremely strong ports and Switch by Feral Interactive, I think they probably saw consistent sales over time, and that probably prompted them. And to have the publisher come back to the franchise after so long, I mean, most of the Alien games these days have been kind of double A experiences at a lower price point, and those have been great. Those have been some of my favorite Alien games of all time. But to know that we're getting a full AAA experience again, published by Sega, is very exciting, and developed by Creative Assembly. They had a really rough time with that canceled shooter, Hyenas, which I really question the logic of that game, given some of the marketing strategy with that. But it is still unfortunate when developers put their time and effort and into a game that just gets canceled before it even sees release. And I think that was some of the Alien Isolation people that worked on that one as well.
I played Hyenas a couple of times. Yeah, I went to see it in well, I last played it in Gamescom. I guess it's the last showing at Gamescom in Germany, and it was good, man. It was good. Like, it just felt like the market wasn't there for it. The kind of multiplayer space had moved on. Although it was an extraction shooter still, which I guess we're still well. As I'm talking to you now, like, I know Marathon hasn't
Marathon.
had the cleanest launch, but it's doing well critically. The player base is loving it, so I think that's one that's gonna go in an upward trajectory. But yeah, I mean, there was definitely never any certainty that there'd be an Isolation sequel. You know, so it's lovely that it's got to that point. I mean, a few people I know who worked on that game and left long ago and worked on several projects since. They really didn't think it would ever happen. So it's thrilling to see.
Yeah. And I remember on the lead up to the original Isolation, they had little mini behind the scenes documentaries about the different elements of game design that they put out. And that's stuff I like to see. And podcasts as well. Like, just and it's unfortunately been a thing with movies, right? Like, we got more extensive behind the scenes stuff back in the day than we do now. You see exceptions to that sometimes. But it's something I would like to
That's
see
just
with.
decline of home media, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think
In the
even on
treatment of home
YouTube,
media.
people still want to see this sort of stuff. So that I mean, it's great that we have YouTube channels like Matt McMuscles or Oliver Harper that put in the effort to digging into the developers, and you as well, Mike, like reaching out to these developers and getting some of their stories to include it here, that people know about some of this stuff. But I would like to see more official documentaries as well, of just seeing how things are coming along in the studio. I mean, I remember they talked about in Isolation, like the model, them being torn between like digigrade and plantigrade legs, but I've still never seen that model of the plantigrade like Stompy from that game. So I don't know, I'd be curious to see that. So I do hope moving forward we get more behind the scenes stuff. And I get, being I get publishers and licensors wanting a tight control on the message and the marketing strategy and all that, but I think you can get a little too tight-lipped about things where you're actually hurting the hype around your game rather than helping it. Touching back on your book again, is there a most surprising or interesting piece of new information that you obtained while researching or interviewing folks?
Hopefully. I mean, as some of the things I've definitely raised during the podcast, the kind of the way the Pred Alien was taken out of the PSP Requiem, I thought that was like quite fun. Just the kind of general feeling of like, the Alien IP holders just not really having much say or care as to what was going on with games. I mean, that from everything from the 80s things through to like Aliens Online in the late 90s, there was very little beyond like a little tick, like yeah, that looks cool. Um, there's like stuff I learned about like Knight Rider deals, which I'd never heard about. That was something that is mentioned in regard to AvP for SNES and for Game Boy, the way that a American rights holder, American publisher would basically um, charge a Japanese studio with developing a game, and they'd send them the game design document, but that'd be it. There'd be like no back and forth. It's just like, just make us a game. And that's partly why SNES AvP comes out the way it does. It's basically a side-scrolling beat 'em up, right? The Predator's not really using his cool Predator stuff. He's punching aliens, and that comes from the position of like, well, those games were popular in Japan at the time, and there was a little bit of a communication hiccup where the idea was like, the Predator uses really cool weapons unless he hasn't got any, in which case he uses his fists. And the developers were just like, I guess he's going to just punch these aliens then, or like overpowered slide kick them, which is what I like to do. So the Knight Rider deals would do one, and I assume I really tried looking this up, but I couldn't find any definitive word on it. But I think Knight Rider deal comes from the fact that there was a Knight Rider game made in that exact fashion, where an American publisher sent it to Japan. It comes back. The game's not what they wanted necessarily, but that's just what it was. AVP Extinction is an interesting one. Obviously, the PS2 and Xbox sort of tactical game. It feels like it's crying out for multiplayer. It had multiplayer for a really long time, and then they canned it. They kind of feel like they could have done a much better single player game if they hadn't committed so much time to that. So that wasn't something I was aware of. I also love the little anecdote I've got in there on that game where apparently Fox had had previous pitches like for a Command and Conquer style game with actual aliens piloting tanks, which I love the idea of. That would be little alien tanks with little xenomorphs in them going around the screen. So yeah, things like that, stuff like little tiny things like in isolation, they were playing around with like having bits of the environment fall away and you could see the insides, and little things they would test and couldn't do. I love all those little experiments. It's quite well documented, but for like AVP on Jaguar where they scanned all the models, and there was a period of time, obviously that's being made at Rebellion, so the producer on that had to like basically bring in an alien queen model because you couldn't technically import them because Geiger material was seen as too provocative, a bit too explicit. So they couldn't order through the post the alien queen model they wanted. But the producer on that game went to a model shop. I haven't got the book in front of me right now. I think it was near Boston. Found an alien queen. Took it to England in his hand luggage. Anything to declare, sir? No, nothing whatsoever. Nothing whatsoever. I definitely don't have an alien queen in this bag, and that's how they get that in the game, which is just fun. So lots of little things in the book that hopefully some people will find entertaining, enlightening, or not. Who knows? But hopefully they do.
The environmental stuff for isolation was something I hadn't heard about before, and it's one of my dream things to be in a game. Especially having experienced Frostbite and experienced Battlefield. I'm like, how the hell has this never happened in an alien game? Where if I kill an alien or hurt an alien, it impacts the environment. So when I read that, I was like,
it's
at
pure
least they're thinking
hardware,
about
right?
it.
Yeah, they definitely are. Yeah, and it would only have been superficial. It's not like it would have burned down several layers of the complex or anything. But yeah, it would have been cool to see. Just lots of little things that people try along the way that they have to cut out for whatever reason. Like you say, it all goes back to like that transparency around things, and
Exactly. And it's
what
interesting to know. We love to
yeah,
hear about it.
you got to experiment with things to find what works and what clicks. Yeah.
And I think another pretty significant aspect about the gaming space would be fan made games or mods. You know, the modding scene has been huge ever since the AvP 2 days. I remember there were full like single player mods. Like one that was pretty popular was Under the Hunter's Moon, which just you went through the pyramid and the events of the first film utilizing that game. And so it feels like the modding scene was a bit bigger back in the day with those sorts of things, but it's still active. But we do still see impressive fan games. I mean, one of the really impressive ones I played was by a YouTuber who goes by the name of Blade Ghost, and he did a full Doom 3 conversion mod of the events of Prometheus and then Alien Covenant after that. I loved his Prometheus one. I've played through that multiple times. I still have yet to try his Covenant one. But we had him on our podcast years ago, and so yeah, I think fan games, and there's a lot of like mods. I remember the original Killing Floor had a really cool Aliens mod that I played with that. So um,
Or even Doom as well, the modability of Doom was how so many game developers in the late 90s, early noughties, cut the teeth. And that still had a bunch of total conversions. I played through one of them on the YouTube end of last year, chunk of that Aliens Eradication, I think it was called. So, even now we're still getting total conversions of that sort of stuff, which is fantastic. And you talk about some fan made content in the book as well.
I,
How important do you think that sort of custom or fan generated stuff is to the gaming
I think
sphere?
I think it's more important for the community, for the people who love that franchise, love those worlds, and like you say, like being able to go back to OG Doom or Doom 3 and do conversions around it and other games like that. It's just really, really, it's just a cool thing, right? It's not a commercial thing by any stretch of the imagination. When it came to like mod stuff, I mean, I kind of loosely mentioned it in the book. Again, there's only so many words you can have and so many pages you can print. It would be lovely to do more, but I didn't get all that much in there. I got a few particular kind of like modern retro games in there, like Alien Girl and Aliens Neoplasma. Found out about this little kind of university-made game based on the Minimates range, which I thought was quite fun to include. But yeah, I mean, I think those mods are really, really cool. And like, obviously Doom is one that I would have quite liked to do more on. And originally in my sort of first plans, I had like a proper like section on mods around that. I've just brought up an email here. So this sounds like such a weird brag, but it really isn't. I've been speaking to John Romero recently, and he says that he actually worked on quote one of the earliest Alien licensed games end quote in 1988. When Infocom had a license to make games with the IP, but the game didn't get released because Infocom went into bankruptcy, and that's one of the lost Alien games. Now, that's not in my book. So there's definitely stuff out there that I could come back and include. But you talk about Doom. Well, the man who made Doom really wanted to make an Aliens game. So there's sort of a wonderful kind of full circleness to Doom being this like wonderful tool for creating Alien games. And dear John Romero, if you're listening to this, you owe me a reply to my email. Thank you.
I would love to hear more about that little stint of Doom where it was, them wanting to make an Alien game. That never gets more than a sentence in a lot of things. And
Yeah.
I'd just love to know how significant a thing that was, whether there was pitch done for it or anything like that. So
I
if
mean,
you
that's
get the
it.
chance,
That's his literal
please.
email to me that I'm looking at right now. Like I've just told you everything he's told me. So it's very, very, very
Get more, Mike.
right
Get
information.
more.
Honestly, I need enough people to buy this one that the publisher goes, you know what? Let's do that, but like 100 pages more, and then we'll go for it. Yeah.
I think another really cool element has been the Alien and the Predator guest starring in other games. I mean, we've seen this for quite some time now. We saw it in Mortal Kombat X, had both the Alien and the Predator. More recently, Dead by Daylight was quite a big collaboration. That's still, I think, one of the most played games on Steam. And they had this whole cool Alien chapter, and you could play as Ripley and the Xenomorph. And so those can be fun. I know sometimes people think it undermines the alien scary when you have it like doing the gritty in Fortnite or whatever. But I don't mind it. Whatever. Who cares? You know. Do you have a favorite collaborative event, or even maybe not one you've played, but just one that looked the most fun to you?
I don't know about favorite, but I think what struck me when I was playing through some of these, like I didn't spend a lot of time playing with like you say when aliens show up as kind of guest characters and things. Obviously, you mentioned Fortnite, Mortal Kombat, but the pinball FX tables that in the Alien add-on pack for that. So you've got Aliens, Isolation, and AvP. Like I really enjoy them, and I literally I got that on Switch during the writing of the book. It's not new, like it's about 10 years old, I think those, but I played them to death. Love those. Like it's such a cool little like I've got 10 minutes to play on the train or whatever. I'll just play Alien Pinball, and like Aliens is especially good because like it you play through the game that sorry that you play through the movie, like you can set it up so you play the missions in order. I just think that's really neat. It's not what I expected. I thought pinball was just high score, but it's got a little bit more to it than that. And Isolation as well, on that table you've got moments where the alien appears, so you've got to like hide the ball,
Mm.
right? So there are cool little fun things like that. So that kind of surprised me as having more depth than I expected. But obviously, like the alien kind of makes sense in a game like Dead by Daylight, and even in Mortal Kombat. Weirdly, I don't know. There's something about the kind of aesthetic of, especially Mortal Kombat 10. It was in 10, I think, wasn't it? Mortal Kombat X. It just kind of made
Yeah,
sense, and
that's
I
right.
like the way that they incorporated it within their universe. So it's born from whatever the
And
Baraka
Tarkatan,
species is,
yeah,
what they're called.
the
Uh,
Tarkatan, I
To
think.
carton, to carton. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So again, it's just like that. We want to put this in it, but like just having like I don't know, RoboCop in that is doesn't make any sense to me. But Alien kind of does because it's that's just yeah, biologically it makes sense. So at least they went that extra mile to put it in.
Once upon a time, I was one of those people who didn't like the crossovers for undermining the alien stuff, with the comics, like things like fighting against Superman and stuff like that. I used to hate. But now I play Fall Guys with a little alien grid skin on.
And it's cool, I mean, I'm not saying the Alien Queen is a Disney princess or anything, but you got to find your way into a series however you can, and who knows, maybe there's Fall Guys players who are like, "What is that? That looks
Mm.
interesting. I'm going to learn more about that." And fair play. For what it's worth, I mean, I don't think the brand is too like spread thin across those things. I think they're quite selective still. Not like some kind of IPs that you see showing up everywhere. It feels like Alien is still, there's like lines it won't cross somehow. I mean, who knows what will happen in the future, but it seems to pretty be fairly respected.
Yeah.
I don't know. They did add it to Raid Shadow Legends, so
I did.
I did play a little bit of that, which
just for the memes.
I thought the models were really good, and the CG like promotional movie they did for it was really good. But gameplay wise, I just couldn't get into that game.
Uh, Adam was like, "We'll do a stream of it," and I think about 10 minutes in, 15 minutes in, I was like, "Adam, this does not feel like a good idea. This is boring as fuck."
It was, yeah. But apparently, it was just all about the builds, and I was missing that. But I don't know. Maybe do a little
That's that's one of
gameplay of
those
it as
things
well.
where they're going to make you an offer you can't refuse, right? So I kind of get it. I mean, it feels like when the opportunity comes up to being Fortnite, you go yes. When
Mm.
Fortnite asks, "Do you want to be in Fortnite?" you say yes, because it'd be absolutely madness to not. I mean, I know Epic's had its problems very very recently, very publicly, letting 1,000 people go, but you know, Fortnite is still an absolute beast, complete juggernaut. You would absolutely put your brand in that if you could.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. But that is the one thing I will not. I will just refuse. Personally, I'm like, no matter how many times Adam asks me, no, I'm not getting Fortnite just because the aliens
Oh,
are in it.
come on.
I have some principles, not many, but some.
So, moving from looking to the past to looking to the future, do either of you have a dream Alien Predator AvP game that you would like to see?
Mike, I'll let you go first with this one.
Well, so there's a couple of approaches here, I suppose. One is the aforementioned, what if you did Alien 3, but with a kind of alien isolation sensibility to it? I think that's got real potential. And maybe it's not something you can do as a full game now because we've had isolation, but maybe an opportunity to do something like that exists in the future. But I look back at, the Obsidian game they're making, Crucible, or codename Crucible, the idea of kind of bringing RPG elements into the alien universe. And we got something like Mass Effect that was like, hugely successful for its 3 games, and Andromeda didn't quite hit the same way, but still a very, very big game. And so there are really great sci-fi RPGs out there, and I think now that Alien has really gone beyond, comfortably beyond it all being about the monster, right? It's about, it's always been about the corporation stuff. But, you can tell quite human stories within that universe. You have been for years, but the more, Alien Earth is a great case in point. It's not really just, it's about way more than just the xenomorph. So I'd love to see someone have a swing at a good, like, what is the sci-fi RPG set within that universe? Because I think I think the appetite's there for it. You've got your very strict horror focused. Well, I'm making assumptions, but like it would be wild if the Isolation sequel wasn't with an emphasis on horror, right? It'd be really weird if they completely tore up that rulebook. Then you've got the more action orientated ones like Fireteam Elite. Great, lovely, great multiplayer game. Love that. Get involved. But the kind of bigger RPG styled, maybe more action RPG sort of thing, a la Mass Effect. I think that's prime for something in the Alien universe. Fingers crossed.
That was all. The Obsidian thing, Crucible, I was always like, I don't know how this is going to work in Alien. Precisely because, like what you're saying, Mike, you always think of horror when it comes to it. So I was never too sure about how they'd approach it. But when you got to see the footage of it, it's like, okay, this could have been pretty, this could have been pretty interesting. And like you say, the human element is the corporate element is just as core to Alien now. When I read the newer books, it's and the comics, I guess, as well. It's the human trials that I'm sort of being pulled to in terms of the characters. It's when you start a book with a ship that's falling to pieces and a captain that just wants to keep them together. That's when I'm like, this is Alien. This is
Yeah.
what I'm here for you guys. And
Well, the monster has kind of lost a lot of its fear factor. Let's be fair. It is in Fortnite. It's in Funko Pops, etc. Every kid in the playground knows the alien from Aliens, even if they haven't seen Alien. So yeah, I think there's going beyond that and working within the universe. I almost feel, well, again, another discussion, but Alien Earth feels like it doesn't need to have the alien in it, right? It would have been a compelling series without the alien in it. So there are compelling stories to be told within that sci-fi universe that don't need to have the monster at the heart of the story. So yeah.
But for me, though, I won't say I've put as much thought into that sort of element as Mike has. But for me, the one thing that I would really love to see them do, we've only just got a light touch on. I grew up. We've said that a lot today. Actually, I grew up. One of the games I played as a youngster and was very much into was StarCraft. It's a game that's heavily alien and predator influenced. The Zerg are the xenomorph, the Protoss are the predators, the Space Marines are the Space Marines. And I remember sitting there in year 7 humanities class, drawing my own UI for an alien, a full scale alien RTS. And yes, we kind of got a light touch of that with Extinction, and Extinction is a game that I do very much enjoy. But I really, really want to see them do a proper PC, intense, much more complicated RTS set in the Alien, and well, I guess AvP, just to keep it overall and keep it a bit more interesting. But Alien specifically is begging for that sort of large scale. Who doesn't want to grow their own massive hive and flood across the map with all these aliens? That was a thing about, there was a particular level in Extinction where you could go above your max population count if you played it well enough, when you go around collecting other aliens out of laboratory cells and stuff like that. And that was a bit of a challenge to see who could get the most. And there's just a certain aspect, a certain thrill to being able to do that. And I think still to this day that Alien, Colonial Marines, and Predators are so suited to RTS as a format. And that's something that's my dream game at this point. And my dream mechanic is, again, that frostbite acid burning through a level and impacting the actual level design. But it must be too complicated nowadays. I'm spoiled by bad company. But yeah, that's it for me.
So I am just so starved for AvP since Disney took over that I am ready for AvP to come back. And I think it makes the most sense to have Rebellion do it. I mean, they have such a history with the franchise. Unfortunately, Monolith, everyone clamored for another AvP game from them for a long time. They're no longer around as a studio, unfortunately, and it had been such a long time since they had done horror games. But Rebellion, they recently put out a trailer for this game called Alien Deathstorm, which I love that name for one. And the trailer looks awesome, and it looks like a spiritual successor to AvP 2010. And what it makes me think about is a studio like Bloober Team that made this game called The Medium. And I remember playing that being like, these guys would be perfect for a Silent Hill game. Like, this is just like, Silent Hill, but not official. And sure enough, the next game they do is the Silent Hill 2 remake. So I'm hoping that is what Rebellion has in mind here. They're just like, screw it. We'll just make unbrand Alien game here and show we can do it. And then enough people will be like, God, give these guys AvP again already, that they'll get noticed for it. And that'll be the one after this. But I'm still sold on Alien Deathstorm, and I'm buying the hell out of that game.
It's such a fun title. When I saw that trailer, I was like, yes. Like, when Rebellion pops up on the screen, I was like, I see what you're doing here. Exactly. I see what you're about. I'm not sure whether that is, because from conversations with people, I know they're desperate to make another one. Like, since 2010, they wanted to make another one. They wanted to make a sequel to AvP 2010, like in a couple of years afterwards. There was like, published conversations about it with the Kingsley saying, yeah, Sega are really into it. That's what they want. And of course it didn't happen. So whether this is like, whether Alien Deathstorm is born from they're pitching that and it didn't get picked up and they're like, screw it, we're going to make it anyway. Or like you've just suggested, this is the calling card. This is like, come and play our cool game that could have been an Alien versus Predator game. How about we do another one afterwards? I think somewhere down the line, it's probably going to happen. Like, if you're going to take AvP back to any studio, they're the first pick, right? They're front of the queue. As long as the excellently titled Alien Deathstorm doesn't suck, which you really hope it doesn't. But yeah, that's so funny. I can't wait for that. I mean, I didn't even catch when it's out. Is it a next year thing?
It's next year. It's 2027.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think they've grown so much as a studio. I mean, they have their whole like the volume kind of stuff. They're starting to do at their studio as well, and that made me think of, oh, they had those FMV screens of the developers that were the Marines that would like tell you the story. What if they did that, but now? And have those guys doing that again, but in like the modern context with a full story with cutscenes as well and all that. So it's not just that, but having that element would be so cool to do, or maybe just having it be like completely photorealistic, the style that they're going for. So just thinking about what Rebellion could do with AvP now, especially after seeing that trailer for Alien Deathstorm, just makes me so excited. And it does AvP. It's only a matter of time. You can see with Badlands, they're building towards this thing. And then I think it'll just be like full AvP blast, books, comics, games, and all that. So I'm just ready to see AvP in the gaming space again. On that note, there was an artist who's worked in the industry who's come forward on X recently and shared some artwork from a pitch I think David Leo is his name, and it was like a kind of a spiritual successor, or pretty much just a sequel, I guess, to AvP's Capcom Arcade. But it had like other predator, like a feral predator you could play as, and Naru you could play as well, and it just looks so sick. It's like one of the coolest alien versus predator looking things I've ever seen. So give that guy a game, please. Like, let's get that made. That would also be just a really something I would love to see. Not only obviously the original Capcom game re-release, but a sequel to that with that sort of concept, or even just a fighting game with all the different aliens and predators through the years would be really cool to see.
I really felt Badlands was almost like a video game itself. You know, the kind of like hero loses all of his powers and has to like craft things, and you get the little like chatty little sub character, you know, that you know, the guy in God of War that attaches to your belt. Well, now you're wearing it as a backpack, you know, all these kind of things. And you know, the kind of end boss that can't be beaten and kill it until it can, you know, that's very kind of Resident Evil. This thing is going to come for you but you can't defeat it, etc. Like, it really, I mean, I like Badlands a lot. It's a lot of fun, but like, you know, story wise it is like at the video game level, right? And even structurally, I think there's a little part of my brain that's like, and you guys would know much better than me, like it almost feels like that's something that someone had in their back pocket for a video game that they were like, no, we can movie this. I don't know.
I think you start to see a lot more video game narrative influence on filmmakers now, because it was just been such a significant part of
Yeah, grew up with it, right? So, yeah.
growing up with it. And Dan Trachtenberg has spoke quite often about, you know, how video games do impact him and influence him on the Predator stuff he's been doing. So I see the
Can
influence.
def see it. Yeah.
And that's another dream game that we'd like Dan to hopefully do, is one of those kind of open world or open galaxy predator video games where you're just going around a huge map hunting different things as the predator.
Yeah, we obviously haven't spoke much about Predator games. There is a few in the book, just a few right at the end that I kind of summarize very, very briefly, but it does feel like Predator's a little bit neglected. I know you've got what's the one that they re-released on PS5 or PS4, PS5?
Hunting Grounds.
Hunting Grounds, thank you. So that's still the most recent one, I think, is it?
Yeah,
probably overdue something.
Yeah, that was a fun game. You know, that understood Predator at its core in terms of starting arcadey and then going seriously as part of its gameplay loop. But you know, we have a bit of a saying when we tend to talk about, well, I suppose I have, sorry, a bit of a saying when we tend to talk about Hunting Grounds, and it's a shame about a lot of the potential that was squandered with it due to all the licensing issues that came up.
Yeah, it's just such a strong foundation. Like, the gameplay loop is so solid there that we were, I think, frustrated that it wasn't getting as much new content as we were hoping for. But again, it was being published by Sony at the time, and Elphonic is a smaller developer. Elphonic eventually took over for publishing, so I think they've been able to be a bit more open with that game now, and they're still releasing content for it. So I hope that game can get a real second wind moving forward. And I would love to see a sequel to that as well. But I think we are fiending for like a single player Predator experience.
Absolutely.
Again, it's been a long time.
That's the other dream game, really, isn't it? That we finally get that open world Predator game that Concrete Jungle was originally intended to be. You know, give us GTA and meets Predator, please. That's the real dream. Well, I think that's all our talking points hit. Mike, was there anything specifically you wanted to mention that we just haven't hit? Anything you want to, any anecdote or thought that you want to share before we wrap it up?
Not beyond thanking you both very much for having me, really. Like, it's been great chatting away and listening to your own experiences and leaving the chat thinking about a big burly predator bowling through an American city, tearing doors off cars and stuff, and you know, ram raiding a shop and stealing money out the till. The Predator GTA, that'd be amazing. But no, just yes, thanks for having me. I hope that, you know, people amongst your listeners find the book and find it to their liking, and if there's anything you don't like, just don't tell me about it, and we'd all get along fine.
Oh, one of the things I was wanting to mention that I noticed in the book is it looked like you took some new pictures, or you had pictures taken of some of this stuff, and that was cool to see. Just some photography
Yeah,
of like.
some packaging. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
especially with things like the MSX aliens, getting some packaging photos of that was quite important, I think. And then some of it's my own really amateur photography, but I think it's nicer than just that same screenshot you've seen 1,000 times before, etc. So yeah, we tried to like kind of connect that. People remember the box art and stuff almost as much as they do
Mm.
the in-game experiences, like you, Aaron, holding up your Alien trilogy, so I got that next to my PlayStation copy as well, and we'll take a picture of that together. So yeah, there's photographs in it. There's also like things like I mentioned the map from Aliens, the computer game. Like I got sent by the designer of that game, sent me like the hand-drawn map, so that's in the book with some of his original designs. And there's some like fun concept art from Isolation and stuff in there as well. So yeah, hopefully people find some interesting tidbits, and maybe something they didn't know before, and get excited for what's next, because there are more games on the way.
Absolutely. I was surprised to see we got a couple of mentions in there as well, which I was quite
Yes, yeah.
chuffed at
Like you
that.
say, your website's been there for a long time. It's got its resources. So I definitely found some things, especially about some of those like old mobile games. Not much documentation around them, so you do find the source for information is people talking about them on forums.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see you'd spoke to our boss as well.
I did
Yeah.
email, about one of the games that there wasn't much about, and there seemed to be conflicting information on. So, but yeah, he was like, I don't really remember. So that's how that is in that chapter of the book's about 30 words long or something. Yeah, this happened. It definitely happened, but no one's really sure about how it happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was one of the AVPs.
So where can folks go if they want to keep up with your work, or if they want to pre-order the book? It is up for pre-order now, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. So Alien's a video game. Video games, if you type that into Amazon or Waterstones or Foils, it will pop up. But the publisher is White Owl. So if you Google for like White Owl gaming books or White Owl Alien video games, it will take you straight to that page. And I don't know exactly when this podcast is going out, but if it's the right side of Alien Day, this side of Alien Day, there's a discount at the publishers direct from them, so you get like £9 off RRP or something. So if you're going to pre-order it anywhere, that's the place to do it. And if you don't pre-order it, then hopefully you'll see it down the line and maybe give it a look.
And whenabouts is it publishing? Sorry,
The actual book is in stores end of August.
end of August. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
but yeah, we wanted to get it up and ready, and people looking at it in time for Alien Day, obviously. So perfectly timing, and of course with Aliens 40th coming up as well in July, gives me an opportunity to kind of plug it then as well.
Yeah. And you're on just Blue Sky at the minute.
Yeah, just Blue Sky, really. Yeah, I'm one of the people that abandoned Twitter a while ago.
'cause there's not many good ones these days. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah. I had to get away from that. But yeah, you can just if you look for Mike Diver on Blue Sky, you'll find me there. That's where I do most of my posting about whatever it is I post about. I don't know, Nova Storm today. I posted, no one knows that game, an old Signosis game, but I did the kind of like, we're recording on a Saturday, so I did like a random game Saturday, a random Saturday game, and I just picked that one up off the shelf. So you get the occasional retro games in there, you get the occasional Alien chat, and I'm a Southampton Football Club supporter as well, so you will have to endure me moaning about them sometimes as well.
Adam, what about us though? If people have come to listen to Mike,
Well, you can always find us on our main hub of activity, which is our website, avpgalaxy.net. We're also on all the major social channels, the good and the bad, mostly bad, but they're still around. Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and more recently, TikTok, as well as YouTube, if you are one of our listeners. Big thank you, as always, to our Patreon supporters. If you'd like to support what we do at AVP Galaxy, check out our Patreon, which is patreon.com/AVP Galaxy.
indeed. And if you haven't been looking at us on YouTube, pretty much most Sunday evenings, UK time, midday American time, we spend a couple of hours playing one of the various Alien and Predator video games, and you can come join us and have a chat as we explore the back catalogue of Alien for the millionth time over our years of existence. But it's still always fucking awesome.
Are we that old?
I feel it, mate. I feel it. Anyway, well, thank you once again to our audience, whether that's listening or watching. This has been Corporal Hicks.
RidgeTop.
And yeah, thanks. I've been Mike Diver. And just remember, the only way you can really be sure about any of this is to nuke it all from orbit.